The stagecoach door swung open, and Cade Mercer's entire plan fell apart. He'd asked for plain. He'd asked for quiet. He'd asked for forgettable. What stepped down onto his Montana dirt wasn't any of those things. She was older, much older than he'd imagined, silver-haired, straight-backed, dressed like she'd just left some Eastern ballroom instead of a 3-day ride through hell. Lady Evelyn Ashcroft looked him dead in the eye, and Cade felt something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not the kind that comes from bullets or bad weather, the kind that comes from knowing you're already outmatched. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stick around, because Cade Mercer's about to learn that the woman he tried to send away might be the only thing standing between him and total ruin. The ranch was dying. Cade Mercer knew it the way a man knows his own bones are breaking. Slow, certain, inevitable. The fences sagged. The barn roof leaked in 4 places. The cattle count had dropped by 1/3 in 2 seasons, and the bank in Helena was getting impatient with letters that stopped sounding polite 6 months ago. He stood on the porch of the main house, a structure that had once been sturdy and proud, but now looked like it was held together by stubbornness and dry rot. The wood groaned under his boots. The wind came down off the mountains with the kind of cold that didn't care if you were ready for it or not. 38 years old, a war behind him, a dead wife 6 years in the ground, a son who'd made it to 4 before fever took him 2. Cade had survived all of it, but survival wasn't the same as living, and he knew that difference better than most. He'd sent the letter 3 months ago. It had been a practical decision, the kind a man makes when he's run out of options that don't involve admitting defeat. He needed help, the kind that didn't cost wages he couldn't pay. A wife made sense, someone to manage the house, keep the books, maybe cook something that didn't taste like leather and regret. He'd been specific in the letter, plain, hardworking, not looking for romance. He'd even added a line about preferring someone older, someone past the age of expecting pretty words and soft treatment. What he'd meant was someone invisible, someone who wouldn't ask questions or expect anything resembling affection. The stagecoach was late. Cade checked his pocket watch for the 3rd time in 10 minutes, then shoved it back into his vest with more force than necessary. The stage from Helena was supposed to arrive by noon. It was past 2 now, and the sky had that peculiar copper tint that meant snow was coming, whether anyone liked it or not. He heard the rattle of wheels before he saw it, the coach lurching up the long road that cut through his land like a scar. Dust rose behind it in a thin, tired cloud. The horses looked about as enthusiastic as Cade felt. The driver, a man named Petey, who'd been running this route for 15 years, pulled the team to a stop with a shout and a crack of the reins. He climbed down, spat into the dirt, and gave Cade a look that was half amusement, half pity. "Afternoon, Mercer." "Petey." "Got your delivery." Cade nodded. His stomach tightened in a way that felt uncomfortably close to nervousness, which was ridiculous. This was a business arrangement, nothing more. Petey walked around to the coach door, opened it, and stepped back. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a gloved hand appeared, fine leather, stitched carefully, the kind of thing Cade hadn't seen since before the war. The hand gripped the frame of the door, and a woman stepped out. Cade's first thought was that Petey had picked up the wrong passenger. His second thought was that he was in serious trouble. She was tall, taller than he'd expected, and she moved with the kind of precision that came from a lifetime of people watching her move. Her dress was dark blue, tailored, free of dust in a way that seemed impossible after 3 days on Montana roads. Her hair was silver gray, pulled back in a style that didn't try to hide her age, but made it look like a choice instead of a sentence. But it was her face that stopped him cold. She wasn't beautiful in the way young women were beautiful. There was nothing soft about her. Her features were sharp, aristocratic, the kind of face that belonged in an oil painting in some manor house back east. Her eyes were pale gray, cool and assessing, and when they landed on Cade, he felt like he was being measured and found wanting. She didn't smile. "Mr. Mercer, I presume." Her voice was clipped, English, and carried the kind of authority that made men straighten their spines without thinking about it. Cade stared. "I am Lady Evelyn Ashcroft," she continued when he didn't respond. "I believe you sent for me." He found his voice, though it came out rougher than he intended. "There's been a mistake." Her expression didn't change. "I assure you there has not. I didn't—" He stopped, Tried again. I asked for someone practical, someone who could work. And you believe I cannot? It wasn't a question. It was a challenge, delivered with the same tone a general might use before ordering a charge. Cade glanced at Petey, who was doing an extremely poor job of hiding his grin. No help there. Ma'am, Cade said carefully, I don't know what you were told, but this isn't... He gestured at the ranch, the sagging barn, the house with its peeling paint. This isn't the kind of place for someone like you. Someone like me. She repeated the words slowly, as if testing them for hidden insults. You mean someone older? I mean someone, he struggled, refined. I see. She turned slightly, looking at the property with the same expression she'd used on him. You requested a mail-order bride, Mr. Mercer. You specified that you preferred a woman of mature years, someone practical and hard-working, someone uninterested in romantic fantasy. I fit every requirement you listed. That's not... I am 57 years old, she said crisply. I am in excellent health. I read and write fluently in 3 languages. I managed a household staff of 23 for 30 years. I can keep accounts, preserve food, sew, cook, and organize efficiently. I do not tire easily, I do not complain, and I do not expect to be coddled. If you believe those qualifications insufficient, you are welcome to explain why. Cade opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I'll be honest with you, ma'am, he finally said. I can't afford to send you back. Then it seems we have an arrangement. No. The word came out harder than he meant it. No, we don't. I appreciate you making the trip, but this isn't going to work. Something shifted in her expression. Not anger exactly, but something colder and more dangerous. You are refusing me, she said quietly. I'm saying there's been a misunderstanding. Because I am not young. Because you're... He gestured helplessly at her, at the dress, at the way she stood like she was about to be presented to royalty. You don't belong here. I see. She drew herself up even straighter, which Cade wouldn't have thought possible. Then I suppose I should thank you for your honesty, Mr. Mercer, however brutally delivered. She turned toward Petey. I will require passage back to Helena on your return journey. Petey shifted uncomfortably. Well now, lady, see, I'm not headed back till Thursday. 3 days from now. Evelyn's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. I see. There's a boarding house in town, Cade offered, already hating himself. I can pay... You will pay for nothing. Her voice could have cut glass. I have funds of my own, Mr. Mercer. I do not require your charity. I didn't mean... You meant precisely what you said. She looked at him with something very close to contempt. You asked for a bride. I traveled 2,000 miles to answer that request. And you have rejected me at first sight because I do not meet your expectations of what a frontier wife should look like. That's not... Do not insult my intelligence by pretending otherwise. The words hung in the cold air between them. Cade felt his face heat despite the temperature. Petey cleared his throat. I gotta get moving, folks. Losing daylight. Evelyn didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on Cade. I propose an alternative arrangement. Cade frowned. What? 1 month, she said. Give me 30 days to prove that I am capable of managing your household and assisting with your ranch. If, at the end of that time, you still believe I am unsuitable, I will leave without protest. You will owe me nothing, not money, not explanation, not even courtesy. Why would you... Because, she interrupted, I did not travel halfway across a continent to be dismissed like a servant who displeased her master. Because I am not fragile, Mr. Mercer, despite what my age and bearing may suggest, and because I suspect, though you will not admit it, that you need help far more desperately than you are willing to acknowledge. She was right, every word of it. The ranch was failing, he was failing, and pride was expensive when you couldn't afford to eat. But letting this woman, this elegant, impossibly out-of-place woman, stay was asking for disaster. 1 month, Evelyn repeated. Prove me wrong, Mr. Mercer, or admit that perhaps your judgment was hasty. Cade looked at Petey, who shrugged as if to say, Your funeral, friend. He looked back at Evelyn, who watched him with those cool gray eyes that didn't flinch or soften. 1 month, he heard himself say, but I'm not making any promises. I would not expect you to. Petey grinned and started hauling luggage down from the coach. There were 3 cases, real leather, monogrammed, The kind of thing that probably cost more than Cade's last 3 cattle sales combined. "I'll be back Thursday," Petey called as he climbed back onto the driver's bench. "You folks have fun now?" The coach rolled away, leaving Cade standing in the dirt with a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a painting and into the worst decision he'd made in years. Evelyn surveyed the house with a calm, analytical expression. "Shall we begin?" The inside of the house was worse than the outside. Cade knew that. He'd been living in it for 6 years, watching it decay one cracked window and broken floorboard at a time. He'd stopped noticing the details, the dust, the dishes stacked unwashed by the basin, the stove crusted with grease and ash, the way everything smelled faintly of smoke and mildew. Evelyn noticed. She stepped through the door, set her cases down with deliberate care, and took in the wreckage of Cade's domestic life with an expression that gave away absolutely nothing. The silence stretched. "Well," she finally said, "this will require organization." Cade felt defensive in a way he hadn't felt since childhood. "I've been managing." "I'm certain you believe that." She removed her gloves, folded them precisely, and set them on top of her luggage. Then she walked to the center of the room and turned in a slow circle, cataloging everything with the kind of attention Cade usually reserved for counting cattle. "The stove is functional?" "Yes." "Water?" "Pumps out back. Works mostly." "Mostly?" "Gets temperamental when it's cold." "I see." She moved to the window, tested the latch, frowned at the way it stuck. "These will need repair." "I know." "The roof leaks." "I know that too." She turned to face him. "What you know, Mr. Mercer, and what you have done about it appear to be entirely separate matters." Cade's jaw tightened. "I've been working the ranch alone for 2 years. The house isn't the priority." "The house," Evelyn said calmly, "is where you live. If you cannot maintain the place where you sleep and eat, you will not maintain anything else." "That's true." She cut him off without raising her voice. "You know it is. That is why you sent for help." She was right again. Cade hated that she was right. "I'll show you where you'll sleep," he muttered. The bedroom was small, barely more than a closet with a window. It held a narrow bed with a thin mattress, a washstand with a chipped basin, and nothing else. Cade had cleared it out that morning, which had mostly involved shoving boxes of old ledgers into the hallway. Evelyn stepped inside, examined the space with the same unreadable expression she'd used for everything else. "This will suffice. It's not much. I did not come here expecting luxury, Mr. Mercer." "Right." He shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how much space he took up in the narrow doorway. "Supper's at 6. I'll leave you to settle in." "Mr. Mercer." He paused, half-turned. "I meant what I said earlier," Evelyn continued. "I do not break easily. Whatever you believe about my capabilities, I suggest you reserve judgment until you have evidence." Cade studied her for a moment. This woman with her perfect posture and her aristocratic face and her voice that could freeze water at 20 paces. "We'll see," he said. That night, Cade burned the stew. It wasn't entirely his fault. He'd gotten distracted trying to fix a broken hinge on the barn door and lost track of time. By the time he came back inside, the pot was smoking and the beans at the bottom had turned to carbon. He scraped what he could into 2 bowls and brought them to the table. Evelyn sat with her hands folded in her lap, waiting. She'd changed out of the traveling dress into something simpler, still finer than anything Cade owned, but at least it didn't look like she was headed to a governor's ball. She looked at the bowl he set in front of her. "This is supper." "Yes." "I see." She picked up her spoon, took a careful bite, and somehow managed not to make a face. Cade had to give her credit for that. They ate in silence. The wind rattled the windows. The stove ticked as it cooled. Somewhere outside, a coyote called, high and lonesome. "Mr. Mercer," Evelyn said eventually. "Yeah?" "Tomorrow, I will prepare the meals. You don't have to—" "I insist." Cade set down his spoon. "Look, I know I'm not much of a cook, but you are not any kind of cook," Evelyn said flatly. "This is nearly inedible. It's food. It is a punishment disguised as food." Despite himself, Cade felt the corner of his mouth twitch. "It's not that bad." "Mr. Mercer, I have eaten in field hospitals during wartime. This is worse." The almost smile faded. "You were in a war?" My husband was a colonel, she said. I followed him to the Crimea. I was very young and very foolish. Cade waited, but she didn't elaborate. He didn't make it back, Evelyn added quietly. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. They sat in the uncomfortable silence that follows shared grief, the kind that acknowledges the past without dwelling on it. Finally, Evelyn stood and began clearing the table. What are you doing? Cade asked. Dishes. You don't, Mr. Mercer. She looked at him over her shoulder, one eyebrow raised. If we are to cohabitate for the next month, you will need to accept that I do not require your permission to perform household tasks. That is, in fact, why I am here. Right. He stood awkwardly. You will go to bed, Evelyn said. You look exhausted. I'm fine. You look, she repeated, exhausted. I can manage a basin of dishes without supervision. Cade wanted to argue. Couldn't find the energy. Good night, Mr. Mercer. Cade, he said. You can call me Cade. She paused, considered. Very well. Good night, Cade. He left her standing at the basin, sleeves rolled to her elbows, scrubbing burned beans from the bottom of his worst pot. Cade woke before dawn to the sound of someone moving in the kitchen. For a disoriented moment, he thought it was Annie, his first wife, dead 6 years, but somehow back, somehow alive, making breakfast the way she used to before the fever took her and their son in the same brutal week. Then he remembered. Lady Evelyn Ashcroft. 1 month. He pulled on his pants and shirt and stepped into the main room. The transformation was subtle but undeniable. The dishes were washed and stacked. The floor had been swept. The windows, streaked and filthy yesterday, were clean enough to actually see through. And the stove, which Cade had been meaning to scrape down for 6 months, gleamed dully in the pre-dawn light. Evelyn stood at the counter, kneading dough with steady, practiced movements. She'd tied her hair back with a plain ribbon. Her dress was simple, covered by an apron that looked like it had seen hard use. She glanced up when she heard him. Good morning. Morning. He stared at the room. You've been busy. I could not sleep. I thought I might as well be useful. You didn't have to. We have established that I do not require your permission. She shaped the dough into a loaf and set it aside. Coffee? Yeah, thanks. She poured him a cup, actual coffee, not the bitter recycled grounds he'd been choking down for weeks, and handed it to him without comment. Cade took a sip. It was good. Better than good. How did you— I found your stores, Evelyn said. You have been rationing poorly. There is plenty if managed correctly. I've been managing alone, she finished. Yes, that much is evident. She moved around the kitchen with efficiency that came from decades of practice, checking the oven, testing the heat, adjusting dampers with the casual expertise of someone who knew exactly what she was doing. Cade watched her and felt something uncomfortably close to inadequacy. I need to check the cattle, he said abruptly. North pasture. Very well. I'll be back by noon. I will have lunch ready. He nodded, set down the cup, and headed for the door. Cade. He stopped, turned. Evelyn stood with her hands folded in front of her, backlit by the stove. I meant what I said. I do not break easily, but I also do not expect you to pretend this arrangement is anything other than what it is. Which is? A test. She met his eyes without flinching. For both of us. Cade didn't have an answer to that. He left her standing in the kitchen and walked out into the cold morning air where things made sense and nothing required him to have feelings he couldn't name. The days began to blur. Evelyn worked. That was the simplest way to describe it. She worked with the kind of relentless, methodical focus that made Cade's own efforts look haphazard by comparison. She started with the house. Room by room, she cleaned, organized, and repaired what could be repaired. She didn't ask for help. She didn't complain. She just did the work. And when Cade came in at night, the evidence was impossible to ignore. Broken hinges got fixed. Cracked windows got patched. The stove, cleaned properly for the first time in years, started drawing air correctly and stopped filling the house with smoke. The food improved dramatically. Evelyn could cook. Not just basic frontier survival cooking, but actual meals. Bread that didn't taste like sawdust, stews with flavor, even pies when she found the ingredients for them. Where did you learn this? Cade asked one night, halfway through a meal that actually made him want to keep eating. I managed a household. Evelyn said. That includes understanding what makes a household function. Food is central. You didn't have cooks? We did, but I learned from them. A competent manager understands the work being done. Your husband teach you that? No. Her expression flickered, something brief and complicated. My husband believed management was beneath a woman of breeding. I disagreed. Frequently. Cade filed that away. He was starting to understand that Evelyn's life before Montana had been more complicated than her bearing suggested. After 2 weeks, she asked to see the account books. Cade hesitated. The books were a disaster. Months of missed entries, rough estimates, numbers that didn't balance because he'd stopped trying to make them balance. Why? He asked. Because I suspect your financial situation is significantly worse than you have indicated, Evelyn said calmly, and because I cannot help manage a ranch when I do not understand its position. It's not Cade. She used his first name deliberately, the way she'd started doing when she wanted him to stop being stubborn. Show me the books. He did. She spent 3 hours at the kitchen table, working through the ledgers with a pencil and a piece of scratch paper, occasionally making small sounds of displeasure that made Cade want to leave the room. Finally, she looked up. This is worse than I thought. I know. You are 4 months behind on your banknote. I know that too. Your cattle inventory is down 30% year over year. I know. And your expenses exceed your income by nearly 40%. Cade said nothing. Evelyn tapped the ledger with one finger. You are going to lose this ranch. Not if I can… Yes, she interrupted. Even if you work 20 hours a day for the next year, you will lose it. The mathematics are quite clear. Something cold settled in Cade's chest. Then what's the point? The point, Evelyn said, is that mathematics can be changed. You need income, quickly. You are trying to do everything yourself, which guarantees you will fail at most of it. She stood, began pacing. You need to sell something, immediately. I can't sell the cattle. I need them for, not cattle, land. Cade stared at her. No. You have over 600 acres. You are barely using half of it. That land is sitting idle while you lose the ranch it belongs to. Her voice was sharp now, cutting. Pride is a luxury, Cade. You cannot afford it. It's not pride. That land is… He stopped, tried to find words. My father cleared that land. My grandfather before him. I'm not selling it to some… Then you will lose all of it, Evelyn said flatly. Is that preferable? I'll figure something out. With what? Hope? If I have to. They glared at each other across the kitchen table, this hardened rancher and this impossible woman who'd been here barely 2 weeks and was already trying to dismantle everything he'd been holding together with stubbornness and spit. I will not sell the land, Cade said. Then you are a fool. Maybe. Evelyn's jaw tightened. Then I suppose we will both watch this ranch die. How noble. She turned and walked out of the room. Cade sat alone at the table, looking at the numbers that proved she was right, hating every single one of them. 2 days later, Boone Harrow showed up. Cade heard the horses before he saw them, 4 riders coming up the road at an easy pace that said they weren't in any hurry and didn't care who knew it. He recognized Boone immediately. Hard not to. The man owned half the valley and had been trying to buy the other half for the past 5 years. He was big, broad-shouldered, with the kind of face that looked friendly until you noticed his eyes never matched his smile. Mercer! Boone called out cheerfully. Long time. Cade walked off the porch, keeping his hands visible and empty. Boone. Heard you got yourself a wife. Boone swung down from his horse, grinning. Thought I'd come by and offer congratulations. News travels fast. Small valley. Boone's eyes drifted past Cade to the house. She around? Inside. Pretty, is she? That's none of your business. Boone laughed. Touchy. Can't blame you. Man gets lonely out here. Cade didn't respond. Actually, Boone continued, I came by for more than socializing. Wanted to talk about your situation. What situation? The one where you're 4 months behind on your note and the bank's getting nervous. Boone's smile didn't waver. Word is they're thinking about calling in the loan. Cade's stomach dropped. Where'd you hear that? I got friends in Helena. Boone shrugged. Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. Opposite, actually. I want to help. Help how? I'll buy the ranch. Right now. Cash. Enough to clear your debt and give you a fresh start somewhere else. Cade felt his hands curl into fists. Not interested. Come on now, be reasonable. You can't make this work. Your cattle count's down, your land's half maintained, and now you got a wife to feed too. You're drowning, Cade. I'm managing. You're dying slow. Boone stepped closer. I'm offering you a life raft. Take it. No. The friendliness in Boone's expression dimmed slightly. You're making a mistake. That's my business. Is it? Boone glanced at the house again. Because seems to me you got someone else to think about now. That new wife of yours, what's she gonna do when the bank takes everything and leaves you with nothing? That won't happen. Won't it? Boone's voice dropped. Think about it, Mercer. You got maybe 6 months before this whole thing collapses. I'm giving you a clean exit. Smart man would take it. Then I guess I'm not smart. Boone stared at him for a long moment. Then he smiled again, colder this time. Your funeral, friend. He mounted his horse, signaled to his men. They turned and rode back down the road, raising dust that hung in the still air long after they disappeared. Cade stood in the yard, fists still clenched, trying to ignore the fact that Boone was right about almost everything. The door opened behind him. Who was that? Evelyn asked. Neighbor. He did not sound neighborly. He wants to buy the ranch. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed. And you refused. Yeah. Even though selling might be your only option. Cade turned to face her. I told you, I'm not selling. Because of pride. Because it's mine. It will not be yours much longer if you lose it to the bank. Her voice was calm, factual. That man, Boone, he is correct. You are out of time. I know. Then I said no. They stared at each other, the tension from 2 nights ago still unresolved, now complicated by Boone's visit and the truth they were both circling around. This is not sustainable, Evelyn said quietly. I know. And yet you refuse every solution. Because the solutions mean giving up. Giving up, Evelyn said, is what happens when you lose everything because you are too stubborn to compromise. What you are describing is called strategy. You need help, Cade. Real help. Not someone to cook your meals and clean your house. You need someone who will tell you the truth, even when you do not want to hear it. Her gray eyes pinned him in place. And the truth is that if you continue as you are, you will lose everything. If you allow Boone Harrow to intimidate you into selling, you will lose everything differently, but you will still lose. The only path forward requires you to stop treating this ranch like a memorial to your father and start treating it like a business that needs saving. Cade felt something hot and defensive rise in his chest. You've been here 2 weeks. Don't tell me. 2 weeks, Evelyn interrupted, during which I have cleaned your house, organized your supplies, balanced your accounts, and watched you work yourself into exhaustion while refusing every practical solution offered. I may be new to Montana, Cade, but I am not new to watching men destroy themselves for the sake of pride. The words hit harder than he expected. I'm going to check the fence line, he said roughly. Running away will not change the facts. I'm not running, I'm working. You are hiding, Evelyn said, but very well, go work. I will be here when you return, as I have been every night since I arrived. But Cade left without responding, but her words followed him out across the cold Montana grassland, where nothing was easy and everything was at stake. That night, Cade found Evelyn in the barn. She'd lit a lantern and was examining the structure with the same analytical expression she used for everything, checking beams, testing supports, making small notations in a book she'd started carrying everywhere. What are you doing? Cade asked. Inventory, she said without looking up. This roof is failing. It will not survive another winter. I know. There is rot in the southwest corner. I know that too. And yet nothing has been done. Cade felt his temper spike. Because I've been busy trying to keep the cattle alive and the bank from taking everything. The barn's a problem, but it's not the biggest problem. It will become the biggest problem when it collapses on your animals. I'll get to it. When? She finally looked at him. After you lose the ranch? After Boone Harrow buys it out from under you? When exactly will you address the problems you continue to ignore? I'm not ignoring shit. Yes, you are. She closed the book with a sharp snap. You are so focused on surviving day to day that you cannot see the larger disaster approaching. That is not management, Cade. That is panic. I'm not panicking. Aren't you? She stepped closer. You work 20 hours a day. You barely eat. You refuse help, refuse advice, refuse to acknowledge that you cannot do this alone. If that is not panic, what would you call it? I call it keeping my land. By running yourself into the ground. If that's what it takes? Evelyn stared at him. And what happens when you collapse? Who runs the ranch then? Cade didn't have an answer. You are not invincible, Evelyn said quietly, however much you wish to be. And this land will not be saved by stubbornness alone. Then what will save it? Strategy, planning, someone willing to make difficult choices instead of pretending there are easy ones. Like selling to Boone, like considering all options instead of dismissing them out of pride. It's not pride. Yes, Evelyn said, it is. And pride is a luxury you cannot afford. She walked past him toward the house, taking the lantern with her, leaving Cade standing alone in the dark barn where the roof leaked and the beams creaked and everything felt like it was one strong wind away from complete collapse. The month wasn't even half over, and Cade already knew he'd made a mistake. Not in letting Evelyn stay. She'd proven herself a dozen times over in ways he hadn't expected and couldn't deny. The mistake was thinking he could keep her at arm's length, that she'd be invisible, forgettable, easy to ignore. Lady Evelyn Ashcroft was none of those things. She was sharp, capable, and relentlessly honest in a way that forced him to see every failure he'd been ignoring. She didn't coddle him. She didn't pretend things were better than they were. She looked at his dying ranch and told him the truth over and over, until the truth became impossible to avoid. And the worst part, the thing that kept him awake at night after she'd gone to bed, was that she was right about all of it. The ranch was dying. He was drowning. And pride was going to kill him if he didn't figure out how to let someone else help carry the weight. He just didn't know if he could. That night, lying in bed listening to the wind test the windows and the house creak like a ship in a storm, Cade thought about Annie, his first wife. The woman he'd built this life with before fever and bad luck tore it all apart. Annie had been soft-spoken, gentle, content to let him make the decisions and bear the weight. She'd never challenged him, never pushed back. And he loved her for it. Evelyn was nothing like Annie. Evelyn pushed back constantly. She challenged him, questioned him, refused to let him hide behind easy excuses or old grief. And somewhere in the past 2 weeks, Cade had started to realize that maybe that was exactly what he needed. He just didn't know what to do about it. Outside, the wind howled down from the mountains, cold and endless, carrying snow that would make everything harder when morning came. But inside, the house was warm. The stove worked properly for the first time in months. The windows were clean. The dishes were washed. Someone had swept the floor. Small things. Practical things. Things that shouldn't matter as much as they did. Cade closed his eyes and tried not to think about what would happen when the month ended and Evelyn left for Helena, taking all of those small, practical improvements with her. Tried not to think about how empty the house would feel once she was gone. The snow came 3 days later, heavy and mean, the kind that turned the world white and made everything twice as hard. Cade was in the north pasture when it started, checking on a section of fence that had been sagging for weeks. The wind hit first, sharp and cold enough to burn his lungs. Then the sky opened up. He made it back to the barn just as visibility dropped to nothing. The cattle were already huddled together near the windbreak, their breath steaming in the sudden cold. He did a quick count, 23 head, all accounted for, then fought his way through the mounting drifts to the house. Evelyn had the stove roaring, every lamp lit, coffee already brewing. She looked up when he stumbled through the door, covered in snow and half frozen. "You're late." Storm came fast. He stripped off his coat, shook snow onto the floor she'd swept that morning. "Cattle are fine. Barn's holding. For now." "Yeah, for now." She handed him coffee without asking if he wanted it. He wrapped both hands around the cup and stood close to the stove until feeling started returning to his fingers. "This will last 2 days," Evelyn said, looking out the window at the white wall beyond. Possibly 3. Probably. We have sufficient supplies? Cade nodded. Thanks to you. It was true. Before Evelyn arrived, his idea of preparation had been hoping things lasted until he could get to town. She'd taken one look at his pantry and reorganized everything, rationed properly, even preserved extra vegetables he'd been about to let rot. Good. She moved back to the stove where something was simmering. Then we wait. The storm settled in like it planned to stay. By nightfall, the drifts were waist-high and still building. The wind screamed around the corners of the house, testing every weakness, finding most of them. Cold air leaked through gaps in the window frames. The temperature inside dropped despite the roaring stove. They ate dinner mostly in silence. Venison stew that actually tasted like something worth eating, bread fresh enough to steam when Evelyn cut into it. You were a good cook back in England? Cade asked. I supervised cooks. That is different. You learned from them, though. I learned many things that were considered beneath my station. She buttered a piece of bread with precise movements. My mother was horrified. But you did it anyway. I did not care for being ornamental. Cade almost smiled. I noticed. Evelyn's eyebrow rose slightly. Was that humor, Mr. Mercer? Cade. Was that humor, Cade? Maybe. Remarkable. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten how. They finished eating. Evelyn cleared the dishes while Cade added more wood to the stove and checked the windows, stuffing rags into the gaps that leaked the worst. You should sleep, Evelyn said. Tomorrow will be difficult. You giving me orders now? I am offering sensible advice. There is a difference. Cade looked at her. This woman who'd been here less than 3 weeks and had somehow become essential to the functioning of his household in ways he couldn't quite name. What about you? He asked. I will sleep when I am tired. You're always tired. You just don't admit it. That is called discipline. It's called being stubborn. Then we have something in common. The wind rattled the windows hard enough to make them both flinch. Somewhere outside, something metal tore loose and went clattering across the yard. Barn, Cade muttered. You cannot go out in this. If something's broken, then it will remain broken until the storm passes. Evelyn's voice was firm. Going out there now accomplishes nothing except risking your life for a piece of tin roofing. That tin roofing keeps the hay dry. And you keep the ranch running. Which is more valuable? Cade wanted to argue. Found he couldn't. Fine, he said. But first light, I'm checking. Agreed. They stood there awkwardly, the wind howling outside, the stove crackling, neither one moving toward their separate rooms. Cade, Evelyn said quietly. Yeah? Thank you. He frowned. For what? For allowing me to stay. I know you did not want me here. I never said you did not have to. She met his eyes. Your face when I stepped off that stagecoach said everything, but you gave me the month anyway. That took integrity. Cade felt heat rise in his face that had nothing to do with the stove. You've earned it. Have I? You know you have. Something shifted in her expression, not quite a smile, but close. Then perhaps we are both learning. She left him standing by the stove, went to her room, closed the door softly behind her. Cade listened to the storm and thought about how strange it was that 3 weeks could change so much. The next morning, the world was buried. Cade fought his way to the barn through drifts that came up to his chest in places. The roofing had torn loose just like he'd feared, and snow had gotten into the hay storage. Not all of it, maybe 20%, but enough to be a problem. He spent 2 hours clearing what he could, covering the rest with tarps he should have put up weeks ago. His hands went numb, his face felt like it had been scoured with ice, but the work needed doing, so he did it. When he finally made it back inside, Evelyn took one look at him and pointed at the chair by the stove. Sit. I'm fine. You are half frozen. Sit down before you fall down. He sat. She brought him coffee, then disappeared and came back with a blanket she'd warmed by the fire. She draped it over his shoulders without asking permission. Thank you, Cade managed through chattering teeth. You should have taken me with you. To the barn? 2 people work faster than one, and I am not so fragile that snow frightens me. I never thought you were fragile. No? She tilted her head slightly. Then why do you insist on doing everything yourself? Because it's my ranch. It is our ranch. For the next week and a half, at least. The words hung between them. Our ranch. Like they were partners instead of strangers, bound by a temporary arrangement that was running out of time. How much hay did you lose? Evelyn asked. Enough. Give me a number. Maybe 50 bales. Hard to tell with the snow. She calculated in her head, her expression going tight. That is a significant loss. I know. We will need to compensate, reduce feed rations, or purchase more. Can't afford to purchase more. Then rations. If I reduce rations much more, I'll start losing cattle. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. Then we are in trouble. Yeah. They sat in silence, the reality of it settling over them like the snow outside. One more problem added to a list that was already too long. I could write to my solicitor in Boston, Evelyn said finally. I have funds. No. Cade, I said no. He pulled the blanket tighter. I'm not taking your money. Why not? It is a practical solution. Because it's not your problem. It became my problem when I agreed to stay here. Her voice was sharp now. Do not be a fool out of pride. It's not pride, it's... He struggled to find the words. If I take your money, what am I? Some kind of partner, Evelyn interrupted. You would be someone accepting help from a partner. We're not partners. Are we not? She stood, began pacing. I have worked this ranch for 3 weeks. I have cleaned, cooked, organized, managed your accounts, improved your efficiency. I have done everything a partner would do. The only difference is that you refuse to acknowledge it because I am a woman, and you believe accepting help from a woman makes you weak. That's not... Yes, it is. She stopped, faced him. You asked for a mail-order bride because you needed help. But what you really wanted was a servant who would work for nothing and require nothing in return. Someone invisible. Someone who would not challenge you or force you to admit that you are drowning. The words hit like a fist. Cade stood, the blanket falling away. I never wanted a servant. Then what did you want? I don't know. The admission came out louder than he intended. I don't know what I wanted. I couldn't keep doing it alone. Then stop, Evelyn said. Stop trying to carry everything yourself. Stop pretending you do not need help. Stop treating this like a war you have to win single-handed. I don't know how. Then learn. Her voice softened slightly. Because if you do not, you will lose. And I will not stand by and watch you destroy yourself when I can prevent it. Cade stared at her. This impossible woman who'd walked into his failing ranch and started fixing things without asking permission or waiting for approval. Why do you care? He asked quietly. Because I traveled 2,000 miles to be here, Evelyn said. Because I am tired of being dismissed as useless simply because I am older and female. Because I believe this ranch can be saved and I am not accustomed to accepting defeat. She paused. And because despite your stubbornness and your terrible cooking and your conviction that admitting weakness is a moral failure, I find I do not wish to see you fail. Something in Cade's chest tightened. Evelyn, do not. She held up a hand. Do not say something you will regret later. Just think about what I have said. That is all I ask. She went back to the kitchen, started preparing lunch like nothing had happened. Cade stood by the stove, still half frozen, and wondered when exactly he'd started thinking of her as Evelyn instead of Lady Ashcroft. The storm broke on the third day, leaving behind a world transformed. The sky went hard and blue. The sun came out, blinding against all that white. And the temperature dropped even further, turning the drifts to ice. Cade spent the day digging out. Paths to the barn, paths to the well, clearing snow off the roof before the weight became dangerous. Evelyn worked beside him, shoveling with steady determination, her breath steaming in the cold air. They didn't talk much. The work was too hard for conversation, but there was something companionable about it. The shared rhythm, the knowledge that they were both fighting the same battle against the same merciless landscape. By sunset, they were both exhausted. They ate dinner standing by the stove because sitting down meant admitting how tired they were, and neither wanted to be the first to give in. My back, Evelyn said eventually, is going to hurt tomorrow. Your back's going to hurt tonight. Yes, I suspect it will. There's liniment in the barn. I am perfectly capable of applying liniment myself, thank you. I was just offering. And I am politely declining. Cade almost smiled. You're stubborn. I learned from an expert. They finished eating, cleaned up. The evening routine that had become familiar, dishes, wood for the stove, checking that everything was secure for the night. Cade was heading to his room when Evelyn called his name. Yes? The month is half over. His stomach dropped. He'd been trying not to think about that. Yeah. Have you made a decision? About? Whether you still wish me to leave. Cade turned to face her. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen, backlit by lamplight, her posture perfect despite the exhaustion he knew she was feeling. Do you want to leave? He asked. That was not the question. It's a relevant question. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. No, she said finally. I do not wish to leave. I find I have become invested in this enterprise, and in its outcome. The ranch? Among other things. Cade wanted to ask what other things she meant, didn't quite have the courage. You don't have to decide tonight, Evelyn continued, but you should think about it, because if you do wish me to leave, I will need time to prepare for the journey. And if I don't want you to leave, then we will need to discuss what that means. What do you want it to mean? I asked you first. They stared at each other across the dim room, a conversation happening in the spaces between words. I'll think about it, Cade said. Good. That is all I ask. She went to her room. Cade stood alone in the hallway, listening to the house settle and the wind test the eaves and the sound of his own heartbeat, which was louder than it should have been. 2 days later, Boone Harrow came back. This time he didn't ride up friendly. This time he brought 6 men, all armed, all looking like they were ready for something more serious than a neighborly visit. Cade was in the barn when he heard the horses. He grabbed his rifle, more habit than anything, and walked out into the yard. Boone sat his horse like a man who owned the world and was just waiting for everyone else to acknowledge it. His men spread out behind him, not threatening exactly, but not threatening either. Mercer, Boone said. Harrow, came to check on you. That storm was rough. We managed. I see that. Boone's eyes drifted to the house. Where's that wife of yours? Inside. Pretty thing, is she? Cade's grip tightened on the rifle. State your business, Boone. Still touchy, I see. Boone leaned forward in his saddle. I heard you lost some hay in the storm. That true? Where'd you hear that? Word travels. Small valley, like I said. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Must be tough. You were already short on feed. Losing 50 bales or so. That's gotta hurt. Cade felt cold that had nothing to do with the weather. You keeping that close an eye on my operation? I keep an eye on my neighbors. That's just good business. Boone straightened. Speaking of business, my offer still stands. Actually, I'm prepared to increase it, 5% over the original. Still not interested. You sure about that? Because from where I'm sitting, you're about one disaster away from losing everything. Storm took your hay. Bank's getting nervous. Cattle counts down. How long you think you can hold out? Long enough? That's not an answer, Mercer. It's the only answer you're getting. Boone's expression hardened. You're making a mistake. You said that last time. This time I mean it. He gestured at his men. See? Thing is, I need this land. Got plans for it. And I'm tired of waiting for you to see reason. Is that a threat? It's a fact. Boone gathered his reins. You got till the end of the month to reconsider. After that, things might get complicated. Complicated how? Accidents happen, Mercer, especially to men who try to do everything alone. He glanced at the house again. Be a shame if something happened to that pretty wife of yours, too. The cold in Cade's chest turned to fire. He raised the rifle, not quite aiming, but close. Get off my land! Careful now, that's 6 against 1. I can count. Can you shoot 6 men before one of them shoots you? Want to find out? For a long moment, nobody moved. The horses shifted. The wind blew. Cade's finger rested on the trigger guard, ready. Then Boone smiled. Not today, but you think about what I said. Clock's ticking, Mercer. He wheeled his horse and rode out, his men following. They took their time about it, making sure Cade understood they weren't leaving because they had to. Cade stood in the yard until they disappeared, the rifle still in his hands, his pulse hammering in his ears. The door opened behind him. "What did he want?" Evelyn asked. "Same thing as last time. The ranch." "And the threat?" "You heard that?" "I was standing by the window with the shotgun. So yes, I heard." She stepped out onto the porch. "He threatened me specifically. He's trying to rattle me." "Is he succeeding?" Cade lowered the rifle. "Yeah." "Good. You should be rattled." Evelyn came down the steps, stood beside him. "That man is dangerous." "I know. He will not stop with words." "I know that too." "Then what are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "We should go to the sheriff." "And say what? He made some vague threats? That's not a crime." "He threatened violence." "He implied it. That's different." "Not to me." Cade looked at her. "You scared?" "I am concerned. There is a difference. You want to leave? I wouldn't blame you." "No," Evelyn said firmly. "I do not want to leave. I want to fight." Something fierce sparked in Cade's chest. "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying. That man believes he can intimidate us into submission." "I have dealt with bullies before, Cade. The only way to stop them is to refuse to be intimidated." "Well, this isn't some society game back in England." "No, it is far more serious, which is precisely why we cannot afford to show weakness." "We?" "Yes. We." She met his eyes. "Or have you forgotten? For the next 10 days, this is our ranch, not yours. Ours." The words settled between them again, heavier this time, more real. "Evelyn, do not tell me to leave," she interrupted. "Do not tell me this is not my fight. I stood here and listened to that man threaten me, threaten you, threaten everything we have worked for these past weeks, and I will not run simply because he wishes me to. He's got 6 men and a lot of money, and we have determination and the law on our side. The law doesn't do much out here. Then we will make it do more." Evelyn's voice was steel. "But we will not surrender. Not." Cade stared at her. This woman who should have been soft and helpless and entirely out of place on a failing Montana ranch, who instead stood beside him with fire in her eyes and a spine that refused to bend. "You're something else," he said quietly. "Is that a compliment?" "Yeah, it is." For the first time since she'd arrived, Evelyn smiled, really smiled. Not the polite expression she used for most things, but something genuine and warm and entirely unexpected. "Good," she said. "Now, let us go inside and determine how to deal with Mr. Harrow before he becomes a larger problem." They spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing options, and every single one was bad. Going to the sheriff meant a 3-day ride to Helena and no guarantee of action. Selling to Boone meant losing the ranch. Fighting meant, well, it meant fighting, and Cade had done enough of that during the war to know how those things ended. "There has to be something we're missing," Evelyn said, pacing the kitchen while Cade sat at the table with the land deed spread out in front of him. "Like what?" "I do not know yet. But men like Boone, they do not operate without leverage. He wants this land desperately. Why?" "Location, probably. My property connects his north and south sections. If he owned this, he'd control the whole valley. But he could route around it, could he not?" "With difficulty. There's a ridge to the east that's impassable most of the year, and the west runs into federal land, can't build there." "So your ranch is the keystone?" "Yeah." Evelyn stopped pacing. "Then we need to determine what makes it worth threatening violence. There must be something beyond mere convenience." "Like what?" "Water rights, mineral deposits, railroad access. Something that makes this land valuable enough to kill for." Cade frowned. "There's no railroad coming through here." "Are you certain?" "Pretty certain. The route goes 20 miles south." "And mineral deposits?" "Never found any. My father prospected some, but nothing came of it." "Water rights, then?" "I've got the river access, sure, but Boone has his own water sources." "Does he?" Evelyn came to the table, studied the land plat. "Show me his property lines." Cade traced them out. The irregular boundaries of Boone's holdings, which wrapped around Cade's land like a horseshoe. Evelyn's finger followed the lines, stopped at the northern section. "This creek here, does it run year-round?" "Spring Creek?" Yeah, it does. Why? Because, Evelyn said slowly, if I am reading this correctly, Spring Creek originates on your land, which means Boone's northern section depends on water that flows through your property first. Cade leaned forward. So? So if you sold to someone else, someone who might divert that creek, Boone's northern range would be useless. Thousands of acres with no reliable water. But I'm not selling. He does not know that. Not for certain. Evelyn's eyes were bright now, calculating. He is threatening you because he is desperate. If he loses access to this land, he loses his northern holdings. That is why he is willing to escalate. You're saying he needs this ranch more than I do. I am saying he needs it desperately enough to threaten violence, which means we have leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind that comes from understanding your opponent's weakness. She straightened. We need more information about his operation, his finances, his legal standing. Can you ask around town? Maybe. If I can get there without his men following me, then we will go together. Evelyn, do not argue. 2 people are safer than 1. And I suspect I can extract information more efficiently than you can. How? Because I am a woman, and men underestimate women. They say things in front of us they would never say to another man. She smiled slightly. It is one of our few advantages. We should use it. Cade wanted to argue, wanted to tell her it was too dangerous, that Boone might be watching the roads, that she should stay safe at the ranch. But looking at her face, determined, intelligent, absolutely refusing to back down, he knew it would be pointless. We leave at dawn, he said, and you do exactly what I say if things go wrong. I will do whatever is most practical if things go wrong, which may or may not align with your instructions. Evelyn, dawn, she agreed. I will be ready. That night, Cade couldn't sleep. He lay in bed listening to the house creak and the wind blow and his own thoughts spiral. Boone's threat played over and over in his head, the image of 6 armed men, the casual way Boone had mentioned Evelyn, the cold certainty that this was going to get worse before it got better. Somewhere around midnight, he gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen. Evelyn was already there, sitting at the table with a cup of tea and a book he didn't recognize. Can't sleep? Cade asked. No. Worried? I am preparing. She closed the book. I do not sleep well before important events. This isn't a society ball. No, it is significantly more dangerous, which is why preparation is essential. Cade poured himself coffee even though it was the middle of the night and probably a bad idea. He sat across from her. You don't have to do this, he said. We have established that I do. I mean it. You could stay here. Let me handle Boone. And if he sends men while you are gone? What then? Cade hadn't thought about that. You'd be safer in town. Would I? Or would I simply be alone and vulnerable while you played hero? I'm not playing anything. Then neither am I. She sipped her tea. We are in this together, Cade. That was the agreement. The agreement was 1 month to prove you could handle the ranch. And I am handling it. This is simply another aspect that requires management. Threatening violence isn't ranch management. It is when the ranch is being threatened. Her eyes were steady, calm. I know you are accustomed to facing things alone, but you do not have to. Not anymore. Why are you doing this? The question came out rougher than he intended. You could leave. Go back to Boston. Find someone who isn't drowning in debt with a neighbor who wants him dead. Why stay? Evelyn set down her tea. Do you want an honest answer? Yeah. Because for the first time in 30 years, I feel useful. Because I'm tired of being ornamental and useless and dismissed as too old to matter. Because this ranch, this place, this impossible situation, it needs me. Not my name or my connections or my late husband's title. Me. My skills, my knowledge, my refusal to quit when things become difficult. She paused. And because I find I have grown attached to this land, and to its stubborn, impossible owner. Cade's throat tightened. Evelyn, you do not have to say anything. I am not asking for declarations or promises. I am simply telling you why I will not leave, why I will face Boone Harrow and whatever he brings with him, because this is worth fighting for. She looked at him directly. You are worth fighting for. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Neither one was quite ready to name. I don't know what I'm doing, Kate admitted. Neither do I. This could end badly. Most worthwhile things can. I'm scared, he said, the words coming out before he could stop them. I'm scared I'm going to get you killed. I am scared of that too, Evelyn said quietly. But I am more scared of running, of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have happened if I had stayed. They sat in the darkness, two people who'd been strangers a month ago, bound now by something neither one had expected and both were afraid to examine too closely. Dawn, Cade said finally. Dawn, Evelyn agreed. They sat together until the first gray light started seeping through the windows, drinking coffee and tea and trying not to think about all the ways the next day could go wrong. They left before sunrise, the wagon rattling over frozen ground that cracked under the wheels like breaking bones. Cade drove, rifle across his lap. Evelyn sat beside him, wrapped in blankets, watching the landscape pass with the same calculating expression she used for everything. The ride to town took 4 hours in good weather. Today it would take longer. The roads were still choked with snow in places, and Cade had to pick his way carefully around drifts that could swallow a wheel. They were 2 hours out when Evelyn spoke. Someone is following us, Cade had noticed 10 minutes ago. Single rider, staying back far enough to be discreet, but not far enough to disappear. Yeah. One of Boone's men? Probably. What will we do? Nothing. He's just watching, making sure we know we're being watched. Evelyn turned slightly, like she was adjusting her blanket and got a better look. He has a rifle. So do I. That is not as comforting as you seem to think. Despite the tension, Cade almost smiled. You scared? I am strategizing. There's a difference. What's your strategy? Do not get shot. Gather information. Do not get shot again. That's a good strategy. I thought so. The rider stayed with them all the way to town, only peeling off when they hit the main street where witnesses could see. Cade caught a glimpse of him, young, maybe 25, the kind of face that hadn't decided yet whether it belonged to a hired gun or just a cowhand looking for winter work. They left the wagon at the livery and walked into town on foot. Helena was small, maybe 300 people if you counted generously, but it had the essentials: general store, bank, saloon, hotel, and a sheriff's office that looked like it hadn't been painted since before the war. We split up, Cade said. You work the general store, the hotel. Listen for anything about Boone, his business, his finances. Anything unusual? And you? Sheriff first, then the saloon. The saloon will be full of his men. That's why I'm going. Sometimes the best place to learn about a man is from the people who work for him. Evelyn frowned. That seems dangerous. Probably is. I do not like this plan. You got a better one? She was quiet for a moment. No? Then we stick with mine. Meet back at the wagon in 2 hours. Cade, she caught his arm before he could walk away. Be careful. You too. He watched her walk toward the general store, straight-backed, elegant, even in frontier clothes, completely out of place and completely unbothered by it. Then he turned and headed for the sheriff's office. Sheriff Tom Wade was pushing 60, with a gut that strained his vest and eyes that said he'd stopped caring about most things years ago. He looked up when Cade walked in, recognition flickering across his face. Mercer. Been a while. Sheriff. What brings you to town? Boone Harrow. Wade's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. What about him? He's been pressuring me to sell, made some threats. What kind of threats? The kind that involve my wife and accidents that might happen if I don't cooperate. Wade leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. You got witnesses to these threats? My wife heard them. Anyone else? No. Then it's your word against his. He brought 6 armed men to my ranch, twice. Having armed men ain't a crime, Mercer, not if they don't do anything. They threatened violence. Did they threaten it, or did they just look threatening? Because there's a legal difference. Cade felt frustration building in his chest. So you're not going to do anything. I'm saying there's nothing I can do, not without proof of actual wrongdoing. Wade folded his hands over his stomach. Look, I know Boone can be aggressive about business, but he's never crossed the line into anything I can arrest him for, And until he does, by the time he does, I might be dead. Or you might be overreacting. Wade's voice hardened slightly. Boone Harrow employs a third of this town. His ranch brings in more money than everything else in the valley combined. So unless you got concrete evidence of a crime, I'm not riding out there to harass him based on your feelings. Cade stared at the sheriff, understanding crystallizing cold and certain. He owns you. Careful, Mercer. How much does he pay you to look the other way? Wade stood, his hand dropping to his gun belt. I think you should leave. Yeah. Cade turned toward the door. I think so too. He walked out into the cold morning air, anger and fear churning in his gut. The law wasn't going to help, which meant they were on their own. He found Evelyn an hour later in the hotel dining room, having tea with a woman he recognized as Mrs. Patterson, who ran the place with her husband. They were deep in conversation, both leaning forward like conspirators. Cade waited at the bar until Evelyn caught his eye and excused herself. Learn anything? He asked when she joined him. A great deal. Her eyes were bright. Mrs. Patterson is quite talkative when she believes she is speaking to another woman of breeding. And? Boone Harrow is in debt. Significant debt. He borrowed heavily from several banks in Helena and Butte to expand his operation, but his cattle yields have been poor for 2 seasons. He is, in Mrs. Patterson's words, leveraged to the point of recklessness. Cade felt something click into place. So he needs my land to salvage his situation. More than that, he needs your water rights to keep his northern section viable. Without them, he cannot support the cattle count he has promised his creditors. And if he cannot deliver, the banks will call in his loans. So he's desperate. Profoundly. Evelyn lowered her voice. There is more. Mrs. Patterson mentioned that Boone had a surveyor out to his property 3 weeks ago. He was mapping something near the boundary between your land and his. Mapping what? She did not know, but she found it odd because Boone has owned that land for 15 years. Why survey something you already own? Cade thought about it. Unless you're planning to claim something you don't own. Precisely my thought. He's going to falsify the boundary. Or has already done so. Evelyn's expression was grim. If he can move the line even a quarter mile, he gains access to Spring Creek without needing to purchase your land. That's fraud. Yes, but if the false survey is filed with the county before anyone challenges it, and if the sheriff is unwilling to investigate, then I lose the water rights and the ranch becomes worthless. Cade felt the trap closing. He doesn't need to buy me out. He just needs to steal what he wants and wait for me to fail. Unless we can prove the fraud before it becomes official. How? We need to see the original survey documents. Compare them to whatever Boone has filed. If there are discrepancies, we'd need access to county records. That means the clerk's office. Then that is where we go. They found the county clerk 2 blocks away, a thin man named Morrison who looked like he spent most of his time trying to stay invisible. When Cade asked to see the property surveys for his ranch, Morrison hesitated. Those are public records, right? Cade pressed. Yes, but what? Morrison glanced around like he expected someone to be listening. Mr. Harrow was in here 2 days ago. He requested the same documents. Did he file anything new? I can't discuss about Mr. Morrison. Evelyn stepped forward, her voice dropping into that aristocratic register that made people straighten their spines. My husband is simply trying to confirm the boundaries of his own property. Surely there is no harm in allowing him to view documents that are, as you say, public record. Morrison wavered. I suppose not. But Mr. Harrow specifically requested that Mr. Harrow, Evelyn said coldly, does not own the county records office. You do. And I trust you take your responsibilities seriously. Something in her tone, not quite a threat but close, made Morrison nod. Of course. Let me get the files. He disappeared into the back room. Evelyn glanced at Cade. Nicely done, Cade murmured. I spent 30 years managing men who believed they had authority over me. Mr. Morrison is hardly a challenge. Morrison returned with a dusty folder. He spread the documents on the counter. Original survey from 1847, updated survey from 1869, and a new document dated 3 weeks ago. Cade studied the 3 maps. The original and the 1869 update matched perfectly. The new survey showed the northern boundary of his property moved south by nearly 300 yards. That's wrong, Cade said. How can you tell? Morrison asked nervously. Because there's a rock formation, big granite outcrop, that marks the corner. It's been there since my father's time. This new survey puts it on Boone's land. Perhaps the original survey was incorrect. The original survey used that rock as a marker. It's written right here. Cade stabbed his finger at the 1847 document. Corner stake at distinctive granite formation, approximately 40 feet high. You can't miss it. Morrison's face went pale. Mr. Harrow said the boundary was always disputed. He lied. Evelyn's voice was flat. This is fraud, Mr. Morrison, and if you file this document knowing it is false, you become complicit. I didn't know. I thought— What you thought, Evelyn interrupted, is that Mr. Harrow's influence would protect you. But fraud is fraud, regardless of who commits it. And I suspect the territorial governor would be very interested to learn that county records are being falsified to steal land from homesteaders. Morrison looked like he might be sick. What do you want me to do? Do not file this survey, Cade said. And if Boone asks, tell him you need more time to verify the measurements. He'll be angry. He'll be arrested if we can prove what he's doing, Evelyn said. Would you prefer to stand with him when that happens? Morrison shook his head quickly. No, I'll delay the filing. Say there's a discrepancy that needs resolution. Good. Cade gathered the documents. I'm taking copies of all 3 surveys for my records. Mr. Harrow won't like— Mr. Harrow can go to hell. They left Morrison looking terrified and walked back onto the street. The sun was high now, warming the air just enough to turn the snow to slush. That was productive, Evelyn said. Yeah, now we just have to figure out what to do with it. We go to the territorial capital, present the evidence to someone above the sheriff's authority. That's a week's ride, each way. Do we have a choice? Before Cade could answer, he saw movement at the end of the street. 3 men on horseback, watching them. One of them was the rider who'd followed them into town. Company, Cade said quietly. Evelyn followed his gaze. Are they going to cause trouble? Probably. Should we leave? Can't. They're between us and the livery. The riders started forward, slow and deliberate. They stopped 20 feet away, close enough to talk, far enough to draw if things went wrong. The one in front, older than the other 2 with a face like weathered leather, tipped his hat mockingly. Mercer, ma'am. What do you want, Dutch? Cade asked. Mr. Harrow wants to see you. Tell him I'm busy. Wasn't a request. Still busy? Dutch's smile didn't change. That's unfortunate, because he's waiting at the saloon and he don't like to be kept waiting. Then he'll be disappointed. You sure you want to do this here? Middle of town with your lady wife watching? Cade felt Evelyn stiffen beside him. You threatening her? Just suggesting you be reasonable. Come have a drink with Mr. Harrow. Talk things over civilized. I've got nothing to say to him. He's got plenty to say to you. Dutch's hand moved to rest on his gun belt. Not drawing, just reminding everyone it was there. Now you can walk over there on your own, or we can escort you. Your choice. Cade calculated the odds. 3 armed men, middle of town, Evelyn standing right next to him. If shooting started, she'd be caught in it. Fine, he said. I'll talk to him. Cade, Evelyn started. Stay here. Absolutely not. Evelyn, if you go, I go. Her voice was steel. That is not negotiable. Dutch laughed. She's got spirit, Mercer. You train her to be that mouthy, or did she come that way? Careful, Cade said quietly. Or what? You'll shoot me in front of 20 witnesses? Maybe. The smile faded from Dutch's face. Saloon, now, both of you. They walked down the street flanked by the 3 riders, every eye in town watching. Word would spread fast. Cade Mercer and his strange English wife being herded to a meeting with Boone Harrow. By nightfall, everyone in the valley would know. The saloon was dark after the bright snow outside. It smelled of whiskey and smoke and old wood. Boone sat at a back table, 2 more men standing behind him. He looked up when they entered, his expression unreadable. Mercer, Lady Ashcroft, please sit. We'll stand, Cade said. Suit yourself. Boone poured himself a drink. I hear you've been asking questions around town. Public records are public. Sure they are. But talking to Morrison, looking at surveys, that's starting to feel personal. You falsified those documents. That's a serious accusation. It's a true one. I've got the originals that prove it. Boone's eyes narrowed. Do you now? Yeah. And if you try to file that fake survey, I'll have you arrested for fraud. By Sheriff Wade? Boone laughed. Good luck with that. By someone with actual authority. Like who? The territorial governor? You really think he cares about some pissant property dispute in the middle of nowhere? I think he cares about corrupt county officials falsifying land records, Evelyn said. Particularly when those records affect federal water rights and interstate commerce. Boone's attention shifted to her. Pretty words, lady. But this ain't England. Things work different here. Law is law, Mr. Harrow, regardless of geography. Law is whatever the man with the most guns says it is. Then you admit you have no legal claim, Evelyn said calmly. You are simply relying on intimidation and force. I'm relying on reality. Your husband is broke, his ranch is failing, and I'm offering him a way out before things get ugly. They're already ugly, Cade said. Not yet they ain't. Boone stood. But they could be. Real ugly. Accidents happen out on ranches, Mercer. Equipment fails. Barns catch fire. People get hurt. Is that a threat? It's a fact of life. Boone stepped closer. Now I'm going to say this one more time. Sell me that ranch. Take the money. Start somewhere else. Because if you don't, you'll what? Evelyn interrupted. Burn us out? Murder us? And then what? You think the territorial authorities will ignore 2 dead bodies? Who says anyone's dying? I'm just pointing out that ranching is dangerous work, particularly when someone is actively sabotaging your operation, Evelyn said. But here is what you have failed to consider, Mr. Harrow. We know about the fraudulent survey. We know about your debts. We know your northern range depends on a water that flows through our land. And we know that you are desperate enough to threaten violence rather than accept financial ruin. That knowledge makes us very dangerous to you, because if anything happens to us, anything at all, every authority in the territory will know exactly who to investigate. And unlike Sheriff Wade, some of them cannot be bought. The saloon had gone silent. Everyone was listening now, not even pretending otherwise. Boone's face darkened. You're making a mistake, lady. No, Mr. Harrow. You made the mistake. You assumed we would be easy to intimidate because we are struggling and isolated. But what you failed to understand is that desperation makes people dangerous, and we are very desperate. She's right, Cade added. You touch my ranch, you touch my wife, you touch anything that's mine, and I will burn your operation to the ground. I don't care if it costs me everything, I will take you down with me. Boone stared at them both. The silence stretched. Get out, he finally said. Gladly, Evelyn replied. They walked out of the saloon into the cold sunlight, neither one looking back, both feeling the weight of 6 pairs of eyes watching them leave. They were halfway to the livery when Dutch and his men reappeared, this time on foot, blocking their path. Problem? Cade asked. Mr. Harrow changed his mind, Dutch said. He don't think you should leave town just yet. That's too bad. We're leaving anyway. Dutch drew his gun, not pointing it, just holding it. The other 2 men followed suit. I said you ain't leaving. Cade felt Evelyn tense beside him. His own hand moved toward the rifle he'd left with the wagon, which meant it was useless now. You really want to shoot us in the middle of town? Cade asked. Don't want to, but I will if you make me. You'll hang. Maybe. Maybe not. Sheriff Wade's real understanding about self-defense. They stood in the street, guns drawn, people watching from doorways and windows, no one moving to help. Then a voice cut through the tension. Put those guns away. Everyone turned. A man had stepped out of the hotel, tall, middle-aged, dressed in a suit that was too clean for Montana. He held up a badge. U.S. Marshal Carson, he said, and I'm real interested in what's happening here. Dutch hesitated. This is a local matter. 3 armed men threatening civilians in broad daylight looks federal to me. Carson walked forward, hand resting on his own gun. So I'll say it again, put those guns away. Slowly, Dutch and his men holstered their weapons. Carson looked at Cade and Evelyn. "You folks all right?" "We are now," Cade said. "Good. Because I'd like to hear why these men felt the need to draw on you." "They work for Boone Harrow," Evelyn said, "who has been attempting to force us to sell our ranch through intimidation and fraud." Carson's eyebrows rose. "That's a serious claim." "I have evidence. Property surveys that prove Mr. Harrow falsified boundary documents." "Do you now?" Carson's attention sharpened. "I'd like to see that evidence." "So would I," a new voice said. Boone had emerged from the saloon, his face carefully neutral. "Because the lady seems to be making accusations without proof." "I have copies of the surveys," Evelyn said calmly, "including the original 1847 document, the 1869 update, and the falsified survey Mr. Harrow attempted to file 3 weeks ago. The discrepancies are quite clear." Carson looked between them. "Seems like something I should review, along with testimony from all parties involved." He gestured toward the hotel. "Let's take this inside, somewhere more civilized." "I've got nothing to hide," Boone said. "Neither do we," Cade replied. They spent the next 2 hours in a hotel room that smelled of old tobacco and dust, spreading documents across the bed while Marshal Carson examined everything with methodical precision. Boone tried to argue that the original survey was wrong, that the boundary had always been disputed, that Cade was lying about the granite formation that marked the corner. Carson listened to it all. Then he looked at Boone. "I'd like to ride out and see this rock formation. If it matches the description in the 1847 survey, that's pretty good evidence the new survey is wrong. And if I refuse?" "Then I get suspicious about why you're refusing." Carson folded the documents carefully. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, we all ride out to the disputed boundary. We locate this granite outcrop. We measure from there. And we establish the true property line. If it matches the original survey, Mr. Harrow, you've got some explaining to do. If it matches your new survey, then Mr. Mercer does. Fair?" Boone's jaw worked. "Fair." "Good. I'll meet you both at the Mercer Ranch at dawn." Carson looked at Dutch and the other men. "And tell your boys to stay in town. This is official business now. Anyone interferes, they're obstructing a federal investigation." Dutch and his men left. Boone followed, shooting Cade a look that promised this wasn't over. When they were gone, Carson turned to Cade and Evelyn. "You folks made some powerful enemies today." "We know," Cade said. "You scared?" "Terrified," Evelyn replied, "but also determined." Carson almost smiled. "Lady, I've been a marshal for 20 years, and I can tell you right now, men like Boone Harrow count on people being scared enough to quit. The ones who don't quit, who stand their ground even when it's dangerous, those are the ones who usually win." He gathered his papers. "Get home safe. I'll see you at dawn." They collected the wagon and started the long ride back. The sun was low now, turning the snow orange and gold. Neither one spoke for the first hour. Finally, Evelyn broke the silence. "That was closer than I would have preferred." "Yeah." "Do you think the marshal will help?" "Maybe, if the evidence is solid." "And if it is not enough?" Cade didn't answer, because the truth was, he didn't know. They'd backed Boone into a corner, which made him even more dangerous. And even if Carson proved the fraud, that didn't solve the larger problem. Boone was desperate. Men who were desperate did terrible things. "Cade," Evelyn said quietly. "Yeah?" "Thank you." "For what?" "For not sending me away. For letting me stand beside you. For trusting that I could handle it." "You did more than handle it. You probably saved both our lives back there." "Perhaps. Or perhaps I made everything worse." "No." He looked at her. "You made everything clear. That's different." They rode in silence again, the wagon rattling over frozen ground, the mountains looming dark against the dying light. When they finally reached the ranch, it was full dark. Cade unhitched the team and got the horses settled while Evelyn went inside to start a fire. By the time he came in, the house was warming and she had coffee brewing. She'd also laid out bread and cheese, simple food, but enough. They ate without talking, both too tired for conversation. Finally, Cade spoke. "Tomorrow could go bad." "I know. If things go wrong, if Boone tries something, I need you to promise me you'll run. Get to the marshal. Don't try to fight." I will do what the situation requires. Evelyn, no. She set down her coffee. You do not get to ask me to abandon you if things become dangerous. That is not how partnerships work. This isn't about partnership. It's about keeping you safe. And what about keeping you safe? Am I simply to watch while you face armed men alone? I've faced worse. That is not the reassurance you think it is. Her eyes were fierce. I will not run, Cade. Not from Boone Harrow. Not from danger. Not from whatever tomorrow brings. You do not have to face this alone anymore. And I will not allow you to send me away simply because it makes you feel more heroic. It's not about being heroic. Then what is it about? It's about not watching someone else I care about get killed. The words came out harder than he meant them. Roar. More honest. Evelyn stared at him. You care about me. Of course I care about you. You think I'd let you stand up to Boone if I didn't? I thought you simply respected my competence. I do. But it's more than that. He stood, needing to move. You came here thinking I'd send you away, and I should have. Because you're right. This is dangerous, and it's going to get worse. And having you here means I spend half my time worried about keeping you alive instead of focused on what needs doing. But I can't. He stopped, tried again. I don't want you to leave. Because I am useful. Because you're... He struggled to find the words. Because somewhere in the past month you stopped being that impossible English lady who showed up on my doorstep, and you became someone I need, not just for the ranch, for you, Evelyn finished quietly. Yeah. She stood, crossed the room to where he was standing. Up close he could see the fine lines around her eyes, the silver in her hair, the aristocratic features that should have made her unapproachable but somehow didn't. I need you too, she said. More than I expected. More than is probably wise given the circumstances. But I am done pretending otherwise. Cade felt something shift in his chest, something that had been locked tight for 6 years suddenly coming loose. The month's almost up, he said. Yes. You planning to leave? That depends. On what? On whether you ask me to stay. Cade looked at her. This woman who'd faced down armed men and corrupt officials and his own stubbornness without flinching. Who'd walked into his dying ranch and started fixing it without asking permission. Who made him want to be better than the broken man he'd become? Stay, he said. For how long? As long as you want. That could be a very long time. Good. Evelyn's mouth curved into something that might have been a smile. Then I suppose I am staying. They stood there in the warm kitchen, close enough to touch, but not touching, both understanding that something had changed between them, something that couldn't be taken back. We should sleep, Evelyn said finally. Tomorrow will be difficult. Yeah. Cade. Yeah? Whatever happens tomorrow, I am glad I stayed. Me too. She went to her room. Cade checked the locks, banked the fire, made sure the rifle was loaded and ready by the door. Then he lay down in his own bed and tried not to think about all the ways tomorrow could end. But for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. And that had to count for something. Dawn came cold and clear, the kind of morning where the air hurt to breathe and every sound carried for miles. Cade was already up, checking the rifle, making coffee, trying to ignore the knot in his stomach that said today was going to change everything. Evelyn emerged from her room dressed practically. Heavy skirt, wool jacket, boots meant for walking. She'd tied her hair back tight, and her face was set with the same determination he'd seen when she faced down Boone's men in town. You ready? He asked. No, but I will be there regardless. They drank coffee, standing by the stove, neither one eating despite Evelyn's insistence that they should. Food felt impossible when your throat was tight with tension. Marshal Carson arrived exactly at dawn, riding a gray mare that looked as tired as its owner. He tipped his hat to Evelyn and nodded at Cade. We're heading to the north boundary? Yeah, about 2 miles up. Harrow coming? He'll be here. As if summoned, the sound of horses reached them, multiple riders coming fast. Cade stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, and counted 8 men. Boone in front, Dutch and his crew behind, plus 3 more who looked like they'd been hired specifically for their ability to look threatening. Boone pulled up 20 feet away. Marshall, Mercer. Mr. Harrow, Carson said evenly. That's a lot of men for a property survey. Just making sure everyone stays honest. That's what I'm here for. Carson's voice carried an edge. Your men can come along, but they stay back and they stay quiet. This is official business, not a range war. Clear? Boone nodded, but his eyes were on Cade, calculating. They rode out together, Cade and Evelyn in front with Carson, Boone and his men following at a careful distance. The tension was thick enough to choke on. The boundary was marked by that granite outcrop, 40 feet of stone rising from the frozen ground like a monument. Cade's grandfather had used it as a corner marker because it was distinctive, impossible to move, and visible from half a mile away. Carson dismounted and pulled out the survey documents. He walked the perimeter, measuring from the rock, checking angles, making notes in a small book he carried. Boone watched with his arms crossed, face carefully blank. After 30 minutes, Carson straightened. According to the 1847 survey, the boundary runs from this rock formation north-northwest for 300 yards to Spring Creek, then follows the creek west. The 1869 survey confirms this. Your new survey, Mr. Harrow, claims the boundary is 300 yards south of here. That would put this entire area on your land. That's correct, Boone said. Except the rock formation is specifically mentioned in both original surveys as the corner marker. Carson tapped the documents. And unless this rock moved 300 yards north in the past 50 years, which seems unlikely, your survey is wrong. The original surveyors made a mistake. Both of them? 50 years apart? It's possible. It's not possible, Cade said. My grandfather built a line shack exactly 100 yards south of this rock. It's still standing. You can measure it yourself. Carson looked at Boone. You want to explain how a line shack built in 1851 ends up on what you claim is your land, when every document says it should be on Mercer's? Maybe Mercer's grandfather built on land that wasn't his. For 75 years and nobody noticed? Carson's tone was dry. Mr. Harrow, I've seen a lot of fraudulent claims in my time. This is one of the more obvious ones. Boone's face darkened. You calling me a liar? I'm saying your survey doesn't match the physical evidence or the historical record, which means either your surveyor was incompetent or dishonest. Either way, I'm not filing it as official. You don't have that authority. Actually, I do. Federal water rights are involved here. That makes it my jurisdiction. Carson folded the documents. The original boundary stands. If you want to dispute it, you can take it to territorial court. But until then, this land belongs to Mercer. Cade felt something unclench in his chest. They'd won. The boundary was confirmed. Boone's fraud was exposed. Then he saw Boone's face, and he knew it wasn't over. Fine, Boone said quietly. We'll settle this legal. Dutch, boys, let's head back. They turned their horses, started riding, got about 50 yards away. Then Dutch wheeled his horse around, drew his gun, and fired. The shot went wide. Whether by accident or design, Cade couldn't tell, but it didn't matter. Everyone scattered. Carson went for his gun. Boone's men were drawing, and suddenly the cold morning air was full of gunfire and shouting and chaos. Cade grabbed Evelyn and pulled her behind the granite outcrop as bullets chipped stone around them. He returned fire, 2 shots that sent Dutch's horse rearing and forced the man to fight for control. Stay down, Cade shouted over the noise. I am down, Evelyn shouted back, pressed flat against the base of the rock. Carson had taken cover behind his horse and was returning fire methodically. One of Boone's men went down, clutching his shoulder. Another's horse bolted, taking its rider out of the fight, but there were still too many of them. Cade reloaded, his hands shaking from adrenaline and cold. He leaned around the rock, fired twice more. Missed both times. The range was too far for accuracy, and his rifle wasn't made for this kind of fight. This is a federal officer, Carson bellowed. Stand down or I will charge every man here with attempted murder. The shooting stopped. Silence crashed back down, broken only by the sound of frightened horses and someone moaning. Dutch was on the ground, his gun 10 feet away, looking dazed. 2 other men were injured. The rest had their hands up, suddenly aware that killing a U.S. Marshal carried consequences that even Boone's money couldn't fix. Boone himself sat his horse, face carefully neutral, like he hadn't just ordered an attack on federal authority. Carson walked toward them, gun still drawn. Drop your weapons, all of them. Now. They complied slowly. Guns hit the frozen ground with dull thuds. "Mr. Harrow," Carson said, his voice deadly calm, "you just made the worst mistake of your life. I didn't order them to shoot. Your men opened fire on a federal officer during an official investigation. Whether you ordered it or not, you're responsible. They were defending themselves. From what? We were measuring a boundary line." Carson gestured at the injured men. "Looks like attempted murder to me, along with fraud, intimidation, and about 6 other charges I can think of. You can't prove I knew anything about this. I can prove you hired these men. I can prove you falsified property documents. And I can prove you've been threatening the Mercers for weeks." Carson's voice hardened. "You're done, Harrow. Your ranch, your reputation, all of it. Done." For the first time, Boone's composure cracked. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. A desperate man who made bad decisions and worse enemies. Yeah, I got a pretty good idea." Kate emerged from behind the rock, helping Evelyn up. She was pale but steady, brushing snow and rock dust from her skirt, with hands that barely trembled. "You all right?" Kate asked quietly. "I have been shot at," she said, her voice tight. "I am decidedly not all right. But I am uninjured, which I suppose counts for something." Carson was binding Dutch's hands with rope he'd pulled from his saddlebag. "Mercer, I'm going to need you and your wife to come into Helena. Give statements. This is going to trial." "What about my ranch?" "I'll have the sheriff send men to watch it. Real men, not Wade's people." He finished with Dutch, moved to the next man. "Harrow's operation is about to get torn apart. His creditors will circle the moment word gets out. You won't have to worry about him anymore." Boone was still on his horse, staring at Cade with cold hatred. "This isn't over." "Yeah," Cade said. "It is." "You think you won? You're still broke. Your ranch is still dying. All you did was delay the inevitable." "Maybe, but at least I'll die on my own land, not yours." Carson finished restraining the able-bodied men and checked on the injured. One had a shoulder wound that needed immediate attention. The other had taken a ricochet to the leg and was bleeding badly. "We need to get these men to town," Carson said. "Mercer, can you spare a wagon?" "Yeah, I'll bring it around." They spent the next hour loading injured men and prisoners, securing weapons, and trying to calm horses that were still spooked from the gunfire. Evelyn worked alongside them, tearing strips of fabric from someone's shirt to make bandages, her movements efficient despite the circumstances. When everything was loaded, Carson mounted his gray mare. "I'll ride ahead with the prisoners. You folks follow, with the injured. Stay alert. Harrow's got more men who might not have heard what happened here." "We'll be careful," Cade said. Carson nodded and rode off, leading a string of horses carrying men with bound hands. Boone rode at the back, still silent, still staring at Cade like he was memorizing his face for future reference. Cade and Evelyn followed in the wagon, moving slowly so the injured men wouldn't jostle too much. The sun climbed higher, the temperature rose slightly. The snow began to soften. They were halfway back to the ranch when Evelyn spoke. "That was terrifying." "Yeah, I have never been shot at before." "Hope you never are again. You have been shot at before." It wasn't a question, but Cade answered anyway. "During the war, and a few times since. You did not appear frightened." "I was frightened. I'm just used to working scared." Evelyn was quiet for a moment. "Thank you for protecting me." "You protected yourself. I just gave you cover." "Nevertheless." "Well, she looked at him. "You could have left me at the ranch, insisted I stay somewhere safe, but you allowed me to stand beside you, even though it was dangerous. You wouldn't have stayed at the ranch." "No, but you could have tried harder to make me." "Would it have worked?" "Absolutely not." Despite everything, Cade almost smiled. "Then what's the point of trying?" They reached the ranch just before noon. Cade unhitched the wagon and got the horses settled, while Evelyn went inside to prepare beds for the injured men. By the time he came in, she'd transformed the main room into a makeshift hospital. Blankets spread, water heating, bandages ready. The man with the leg wound was in bad shape. Evelyn worked on him with steady hands, cleaning the wound, binding it tight, making him as comfortable as possible. "He needs a real doctor," she said quietly. "Helena's 4 hours away." "Then he may not make it," the man overheard. "Just leave me," he muttered. "I knew the risks." The risks of attacking a federal marshal? Evelyn's voice was sharp. Yes, I imagine you did, though I suspect you did not anticipate the consequences. Boone said it would be easy money, and you believed him. Lady, when a man like Boone Harrow offers you winter wages to ride along and look tough, you don't ask questions. Perhaps you should have. She finished binding the wound. You will live, probably, but you will need proper medical attention soon. Cade was checking on the other injured man when he heard horses outside. He grabbed the rifle, moved to the window. 3 riders. Not Boone's men. These were wearing badges. He opened the door as they dismounted. The one in front was older, gray-haired, with a marshal's star that looked better cared for than Sheriff Wade's ever had. Mercer, I'm Marshal Davis from Helena. Carson sent word. We're here to secure the property and transport the injured. They're inside. Davis nodded, gestured to his men. They loaded the injured carefully and professionally, clearly used to this kind of work. Carson's got Harrow and 6 men in custody, Davis said. Judge will hear the case inside a week. You'll need to testify. We'll be there, Cade said. Good. Davis swung back into his saddle. Fair warning, Harrow's got friends. Some of them might not take kindly to him being arrested. Watch yourself. They rode off with the injured men, leaving Cade and Evelyn alone again. The house felt too quiet after all the chaos. Evelyn sank into a chair by the table, suddenly looking exhausted. Is it truly over? She asked. The fight with Boone? Yeah, probably. If Carson's right about his creditors, Harrow's got bigger problems than my ranch now. And us? Cade looked at her. What about us? The month is over, Cade. Ended 3 days ago, in fact. I should have left by now. But you didn't. No, because I find I do not wish to. She met his eyes. But I need to know what this is. Are we business partners? Are we something more? Because I cannot continue in uncertainty. Cade pulled out a chair, sat across from her. What do you want it to be? I asked you first. Fair enough. He took a breath. When you got off that stagecoach, I thought you were the worst possible thing that could have happened. Too refined, too old, too... everything I didn't want. But you weren't any of those things. Or you were. But it didn't matter, because you worked harder than anyone I've ever met. You didn't quit when things got bad. You stood up to Boone when you should have been terrified. And somewhere in all that, you stopped being the woman I didn't want, and became the woman I need. Need for the ranch, Evelyn said quietly. Need for everything. He reached across the table, caught her hand. I'm not good at this. I spent 6 years shutting people out, and I'm not sure I know how to let someone back in. But if you'll be patient with me. I'm 57 years old, Cade. I do not have time for games or pretty words. If you want me here, say it plainly. I want you here. Not as a housekeeper or a ranch hand or even just a wife. I want you here because you make everything better. The house, the land, me. He struggled. I want to build something with you. Not just survive, but actually build something that lasts. Evelyn's eyes were bright. That is the most romantic thing anyone has said to me in 30 years. It didn't sound very romantic. It was honest. That is better than romance. So you'll stay? I already told you I would stay. I mean really stay. Not just until things get difficult or until something better comes along. Stay because you want to be here. Cade, she squeezed his hand. I traveled 2,000 miles, faced down armed men, survived a gunfight, and cleaned up more disasters in 1 month than most people see in a lifetime. Do you truly believe I did all that for something temporary? I don't know what you did it for. I did it for this, for you, for us. She stood, pulling him up with her. I am not young. I am not soft. I am not what you asked for. But I am here, and I am choosing to stay. And if you will have me, truly have me, not as some convenient arrangement, but as a partner in every sense, then I am yours. Cade stared at her. This woman who'd walked into his dying ranch and started saving it one stubborn decision at a time, who'd faced every challenge with spine and steel and more courage than he'd had in years. I don't deserve you, he said. Perhaps not, but you have me regardless. He kissed her then, clumsy and uncertain, like a man who'd forgotten how. She kissed him back with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else, and for a moment the world narrowed to just the two of them, two broken people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and somehow made it work. When they broke apart, Evelyn's face was flushed and her hair had come loose from its pins. "Well," she said, "that was overdue." "Yeah, we should probably discuss the practical aspects of this arrangement." "Like what?" "Like whether we intend to have an actual marriage or simply continue sharing a house. What do you want?" "I want," Evelyn said firmly, "a real marriage. Partnership, intimacy, shared decision-making, all of it. I did not survive the past month to settle for half measures." "Neither did I." "Good. Then we are agreed." She started repinning her hair with quick, efficient movements. "Now, we have a ranch to save. Boone may be arrested, but the bank is still calling in your loan and winter is coming. We need a plan." Just like that, she'd shifted from the woman he'd just kissed to the woman who organized his accounts and fixed his fences. Cade felt something warm settle in his chest, something that might have been love or might just be profound gratitude that he wasn't alone anymore. "You already have a plan," he said. "I have several plans. The question is which one you will actually listen to. Try me." She poured them both coffee, spread out papers on the table. The account books, the land deeds, notes she'd been keeping in her careful handwriting. "First," she said, "we pay down the bank note. Not all of it, we cannot afford that, but enough to show good faith and buy time." "With what money?" "We sell the south pasture." "Evelyn, listen, the south pasture is barely usable, poor drainage, too far from the house to manage efficiently. It is dead weight, but it is still valuable to someone who wants land in this valley. We sell it for enough to clear part of the debt and give us operating capital. That's still selling the land. It is selling 40 acres we do not need to save 600 we do need. That is called strategy." Cade wanted to argue, but looking at the numbers, she was right. She was always right about the numbers. "What else?" he asked. "Second, we diversify. You have been relying entirely on cattle. That is foolish. We add chickens, pigs, possibly sheep. We plant a larger garden. We stop buying what we can produce ourselves. That's more work." "Yes, which is why it is fortunate there are now two of us." "Fair point." "Third, we improve efficiency. The barn needs repair before next winter. The fences need replacing. We do it now, in spring, when we have time, and before it becomes an emergency. That costs money we don't have. Which is why we sell the south pasture first." She looked at him over the papers. "Do you see how this works? Each piece supports the others. We are not choosing between impossible options anymore. We are building a sustainable operation." Cade studied the papers, the careful calculations, the plans that assumed a future where the ranch survived. Where they survived. "You really think we can do this?" he asked. "I know we can. But only if you stop thinking like a man who is drowning and start thinking like a man who is building something. You make it sound simple. It is not simple. It is very difficult. But difficult is not the same as impossible." They spent the rest of the afternoon going through every detail. What to plant, what to repair, how to restructure the debt, who to approach about buying the south pasture. Evelyn wrote everything down in her precise handwriting, creating a roadmap for the next year. By evening, Cade's head was spinning, but for the first time in years, he felt something that might have been hope. They ate dinner together, beans and bread, nothing fancy, and talked about ordinary things, the weather, the cattle, plans for the garden. Small talk that felt enormous because it assumed a future where they were both still here, still working, still together. After dinner, Evelyn started clearing dishes. Cade caught her hand. "Leave them," he said. They can wait." He pulled her close, and she came willingly, resting her head against his chest in a way that felt natural despite everything still being new and uncertain between them. "Thank you," Cade said quietly. "For what?" "For staying, for fighting, for not giving up on me when I was too stubborn to accept help." "You're still too stubborn to accept help." "Yeah, but I'm working on it." She tilted her head back, looked at him with those gray eyes that saw too much and somehow didn't judge. "We are going to survive this, Cade. The ranch, the debt, all of it. We are going to survive and build something better than what existed before." "You sound certain." I am certain, because I have spent my entire life being told I was too old, too stubborn, too difficult. And I have learned that those things, the things people see as weaknesses, are actually strengths when directed properly. We are both stubborn. We are both difficult. We are both too old to care what anyone thinks. And that makes us dangerous. Dangerous how? Dangerous because we will not quit. Dangerous because we do not need anyone's approval or permission. Dangerous because we have already lost everything that could be taken from us, and we are still standing. Cade kissed her again, slower this time, with more certainty. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said, the words feeling strange and true at the same time. "I know," Evelyn replied. "I have known for weeks. I was simply waiting for you to realize it." Weeks? You think I would stay in a place this cold, this difficult, for a man I did not love? Please, I am practical, not insane. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the fear, the uncertainty, Cade laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in longer than he could remember. Evelyn smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed her whole face. "There. That is better. You should laugh more. Give me something to laugh about." "Very well. We will survive. We will thrive. And years from now, people will talk about the stubborn rancher and his impossible English wife who refused to fail." She stepped back, started gathering dishes again. "But first you need to help me with these dishes. I am not your servant." "Yes, ma'am." They cleaned up together, moving around the kitchen in a rhythm that was still new but getting familiar. When everything was done, they banked the fire and checked the locks, and did all the small rituals that marked the end of a day. At her bedroom door, Evelyn paused. "Cade." "Yeah?" "Tomorrow we start fresh. New plans, new approach, new everything. But tonight," she hesitated. "Tonight, I would like not to sleep alone, if that is acceptable." Cade felt his throat tighten. More than acceptable. They went to his room together, and if what happened next was awkward and uncertain and not at all like the passionate encounters in dime novels, it was also honest and real, and better than anything either of them had experienced in years. Later, lying in the darkness with Evelyn's breathing steady beside him, Cade stared at the ceiling and tried to process everything that had happened. A month ago, he'd been alone and failing, convinced he was past the point of saving. Now he had a partner, a real one. Someone who saw all his weaknesses and stubborn pride and failures and still chose to stay. It should have felt impossible. Instead, it just felt right. "Cade," Evelyn murmured in the darkness. "I thought you were asleep." "I was thinking." About? About how strange life is. How the things we think we want are rarely the things we actually need. You didn't want to come here. No, I came because I had nowhere else to go, but I stayed because I found something I did not know I was looking for. "What's that?" "Purpose," she said simply, "and someone worth fighting for." Cade pulled her closer, feeling the warmth of her against him in the cold Montana night. Outside, the wind tested the windows and the house creaked, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. But inside, everything was warm and safe and finally right. They had a long way to go. The debt was still massive. The ranch was still struggling. Winter would come again, hard and merciless as always. But they'd face it together, and that made all the difference. Spring came slowly to Montana, like it wasn't quite sure it was welcome. The snow melted in patches, leaving the ground muddy and treacherous. The creek swelled with runoff, and the work, the endless, backbreaking work, began in earnest. Cade woke every morning to find Evelyn already up, coffee brewing, plans for the day laid out on the kitchen table with the same precision she brought to everything. They worked from dawn until dark, repairing fences, clearing debris, preparing fields for planting. The trial happened 2 weeks after the shooting. Cade and Evelyn rode to Helena and spent 3 days giving testimony while Boone Harrow sat in the defendant's chair looking diminished and furious by turns. The evidence was overwhelming: the fraudulent survey, the threats, the attack on a federal marshal. The jury deliberated for less than an hour, guilty on all counts. Boone got 10 years. His men got less, but enough to matter. And before the month was out, his creditors descended like vultures. The ranch that had dominated the valley for 15 years was carved up and sold off in pieces. Cade watched it happen with something close to pity. Not for Boone, he'd earned his fate, but for the waste of it all. All that land, all that effort, destroyed by greed and desperation. You feel sorry for him, Evelyn observed on the ride home from town after hearing the news. Not sorry, just, I understand how it happens. How a man gets so caught up in holding on to what he has that he destroys everything trying to keep it. That could have been you. Yeah, it almost was. She reached across the wagon seat, took his hand. But it was not. And that is what matters. The South pasture sold 3 weeks later to a sheep farmer from Wyoming who paid cash and didn't ask questions. 40 acres Cade had been carrying like dead weight, gone in an afternoon. The money wasn't enough to clear the debt entirely, but it was enough to make the bank stop sending threatening letters. They used the rest to buy materials, lumber for the barn, wire for fences, seed for the fields. Evelyn managed every penny with ruthless efficiency, stretching their resources further than Cade would have thought possible. How do you know all this? He asked one evening, watching her calculate feed costs with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. I told you. I managed a household. With servants. With people who answered to me, yes. But before I could manage them, I had to understand what they did. So I learned. Cooking, preserving, budgeting, negotiation. My husband thought it was beneath me. His mistake. His loss, Cade said. Yes. Though I did not see it that way at the time. She set down her pencil, looked at him. I spent 30 years trying to be what he wanted, decorative, silent, obedient, and when he died I realized I had wasted 3 decades being invisible. I decided I would never do that again. You're not invisible here. No, here I am necessary. There is a difference. By May, the ranch looked different. Not perfect, it would never be perfect, but functional. The barn had a new roof, the fences were solid, the garden was planted with more vegetables than Cade had grown in the past 5 years combined. They'd added chickens, too, 20 hens in a coop Cade built behind the house. Evelyn tended them with the same fierce attention she gave everything else, and within weeks they had more eggs than 2 people could eat. We should sell the surplus in town, Evelyn suggested. People might not buy from us. Boone had a lot of friends. Then they are fools, these are good eggs. She packed a dozen carefully into a basket. And I am not afraid of fools. She was right about that, too. The eggs sold within an hour at the general store. The next week, Evelyn brought 2 dozen, and they sold just as fast. By the end of the month, she'd established a regular supply arrangement with 3 businesses in Helena. You're building an empire, Cade said, half joking. I am building sustainability. There is a difference. The money from the eggs wasn't much, but it was steady. And steady mattered when you were trying to claw your way back from the edge of ruin. Summer arrived with heat that baked the ground hard and turned the grass brittle. The cattle grazed the north pasture, healthy and fat, now that Cade had time to manage them properly. The garden exploded with produce, beans, squash, potatoes, carrots, more than they could eat or preserve. We should sell this too, Evelyn said, surveying the excess. To who? The hotel in Helena. Mrs. Patterson mentioned they struggle to source fresh vegetables. We could provide them. Oh, that's a lot of transportation. Then we make the trip worthwhile. Vegetables, eggs, perhaps preserved goods as well. I can make jams, pickles, dried herbs. All of it sells. Cade looked at her. This woman who'd transformed his failing ranch into something that resembled an actual business, and felt overwhelmed by gratitude and love and sheer amazement that she'd chosen to stay. What? Evelyn asked, noticing his expression. Just thinking about how much has changed. For the better, I hope. Yeah, definitely for the better. They made the trip to Helena once a week, the wagon loaded with goods. Mrs. Patterson bought everything Evelyn brought and started placing orders for specific items. Other businesses noticed and started asking if they could buy too. By August, they had regular customers throughout the valley. The ranch that had been dying 6 months ago was now profitable. Not wildly so, but enough to pay down debt and build reserves. We need help, Evelyn said one evening, reviewing the accounts. We are at capacity. If we wish to expand, we need to hire hands. Can we afford it? We cannot afford not to. You're working yourself into exhaustion, and I am not far behind. She was right. Again. Cade had lost weight he couldn't spare, and Evelyn had shadows under her eyes that no amount of sleep seemed to cure. They hired 2 men, brothers from Colorado, who'd heard the Mercer Ranch was paying fair wages and treating workers decent. Within a week, the burden lifted. Cade could focus on management instead of trying to do everything himself. The cattle got better care, the repairs got finished, the ranch started functioning the way it was supposed to. By September, the banknote was half paid. The creditors were satisfied, and for the first time since before Annie died, Cade could look at his land without feeling like he was drowning. "We should celebrate," Evelyn said. "How?" "A proper dinner. In town, like civilized people." "We're not civilized people." "Then we will pretend for an evening." They dressed up, or as dressed up as ranch people got, and rode to Helena in the evening light. The hotel dining room was full of people who'd heard the story of Boone Harrow's downfall and the stubborn rancher who'd stood his ground. Some of them stared, some whispered, a few nodded with grudging respect. Cade and Evelyn ate steak and potatoes and pie, and for 2 hours they weren't struggling ranchers trying to survive. They were just 2 people enjoying a meal together, talking about ordinary things, laughing at jokes that probably weren't that funny but felt hilarious anyway. "This was a good idea," Cade said over coffee. "I have many good ideas. You simply need to listen to them more often." "I'm working on it." "Yes, you are." She reached across the table, took his hand. "I am proud of you, Cade, of what we have built, of what you have become. I couldn't have done it without you." "No, you could not have. But that is not weakness. That is wisdom, knowing when to accept help. Took me long enough to figure it out. Better late than never?" They rode home under stars that felt closer than they should have, the air cooling quickly now that summer was fading. The ranch looked peaceful in the moonlight, the barn solid, the house warm and lit from within, smoke rising from the chimney. Home. It finally felt like home again. Winter came early that year, snow falling in October and not stopping until March. But this time Cade was ready. The hay was stored properly. The barn was weatherproof. The supplies were stocked. And most importantly, he wasn't alone. They spent the long winter evenings by the fire, Evelyn reading aloud from books she'd ordered from Boston while Cade worked on leather or sharpened tools or just listened. Sometimes they talked about the future, plans for spring, ideas for expansion, dreams that felt possible now instead of foolish. "I want to build a proper chicken coop," Evelyn said one night. "The current one is functional, but barely. We could double our flock if we had better facilities. That costs money. Money we have, thanks to the egg business I built from nothing." "Fair point. I also want to plant fruit trees, apples, cherries, perhaps plums. They take years to mature, but the investment pays off. Planning long-term now? I plan to be here long-term, unless you have other intentions?" "No, no other intentions." She smiled, set down her book. "Good, because I'm quite settled here. This ranch, this life, it suits me. Even though it's hard? Especially because it is hard. Easy things do not build character." "You've got plenty of character." "Yes, but I quite enjoy acquiring more." March brought the thaw, and with it, news that surprised no one. Boone Harrow's former ranch had been divided among several buyers, and one of them, a rancher from Wyoming named Porter, wanted to meet with Cade about water rights. They met at the boundary line, the same granite outcrop where everything had nearly gone wrong a year earlier. Porter was older, weathered, with the look of someone who'd been ranching since before Cade was born. He shook hands firmly and got straight to business. "Harrow's men told me you control the headwaters for Spring Creek." "That's right." "I need access. My cattle can't survive without it." Cade had known this conversation was coming. He'd spent months thinking about how to handle it. "Access, yes. Control, no." Porter frowned. "Meaning?" "Meaning you can use the water, free. But you don't get to divert it or dam it or do anything that affects the flow downstream. We share it, equally." "That's generous." "That's fair. Water's too important to fight over." Porter studied him for a long moment. "Harrow would have charged me for every gallon." "I'm not Harrow." "No, you're not." Porter extended his hand again. "We got a deal, Mercer, and if you ever need anything from my side of the valley, you let me know." They shook on it, and Cade rode home feeling like something had shifted. Not just with Porter, but with the whole valley. The old tensions, the constant warfare over resources and territory, were starting to ease. Not because anyone had won, but because people were tired of fighting. Evelyn was in the garden when he returned, on her knees in the dirt, planting something that looked like it would be spectacular in a few months. "How did it go?" she asked without looking up. "Good. Porter agreed to share the water rights." "For a fee, I assume?" "No, free." Now she looked up. "Free?" "Yeah. Seemed like the right thing to do." Evelyn stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. "You realize you just gave away a significant negotiating advantage." I gave away a chance to be like Boone. Rather not take it." She studied his face, then smiled. "You are a better man than you believe yourself to be." "I'm just tired of fighting." "No. You are choosing cooperation over conflict. That takes courage." She kissed him, quick and firm. "I am proud to be your wife." The words still felt new, even though they'd been married officially since December. A quiet ceremony in Helena with Marshall Carson and Mrs. Patterson as witnesses. No flowers, no fancy dress, just two people making promises they intended to keep. By late spring, the ranch was thriving. The cattle count was up. The gardens were producing more than they needed. The egg business had expanded to include preserved goods, and Evelyn was negotiating with a merchant in Butte about supplying his store. "You're building an empire," Cade said, echoing his words from a year ago. "I am building security," Evelyn corrected, "so that we never have to face what we faced before, so that we have choices instead of being cornered. You worried it'll happen again?" "I am prepared in case it does." "There is a difference." They were eating dinner when someone knocked on the door. Cade answered to find Marshall Carson standing on the porch, looking tired but satisfied. "Marshall, what brings you out here?" "Official business and an apology." "Apology for what?" "For not acting sooner on Harrow. I knew he was trouble, but I didn't realize how bad until it was nearly too late." Carson shifted his weight. "Anyway, the territorial governor asked me to deliver this personally." He handed Cade an official-looking envelope. Inside was a letter on government stationery, formal and flowery in the way government letters always were. But the meaning was clear: recognition for standing up to corruption and fraud. Thanks for helping clean up the valley, and a formal pardon for any property taxes owed from the years when Cade had been too broke to pay. "This is—" Cade couldn't find words. "It's justice," Carson said. "Delayed, but better than never. You folks did the right thing, made the valley safer for everyone. Governor wanted you to know it didn't go unnoticed." After Carson left, Cade and Evelyn read the letter together at the kitchen table. "We are officially respectable," Evelyn said dryly. "You were always respectable. I was a stubborn foreign woman who cleaned up after cowboys. Now I am a stubborn foreign woman who cleaned up after cowboys and has government recognition. The difference is negligible." Cade laughed. "You ever regret it, coming here?" "Every single day." He looked at her, startled. She smiled. "I regret the cold. I regret the mud. I regret the endless work and the fear and the exhaustion. But I do not regret you, or us, or what we built together." She folded the letter carefully. "This life is hard, Cade, harder than anything I experienced in my previous existence. But it is mine. I chose it, and I would choose it again. Even knowing how difficult it would be? Especially knowing how difficult it would be, because the difficult things are the ones worth having." Summer that year was perfect. Not too hot, rain when they needed it, crops that grew like they were trying to make up for all the years of struggle. The ranch hummed with productivity. The hired hands proved reliable. The debts continued to shrink. In August, Evelyn announced she wanted to expand the garden again. "Where?" Cade asked. "You're already using every available space." "Then we clear more space." "That's a lot of work." "Yes, which is why we hire another hand and possibly purchase a plow." "You want to mechanize?" "I want to stop breaking my back doing work that machines can do better." They bought the plow, hired another hand, cleared 2 more acres and planted fall crops. The investment paid off within weeks: higher yields, less manual labor, more time to focus on the business side of the operation. By September, they were profitable enough that Cade could finally say the word without wincing. The bank was satisfied. The creditors were quiet. And for the first time in 7 years, he wasn't afraid of losing everything. They were sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sun set over the mountains, when Evelyn spoke. "We should host a dinner." "For who?" "The neighbors, the people in town who helped us." Thank you." "That's a lot of people." "Then we make a lot of food." The dinner happened in October, just before the weather turned. They set up tables in the yard, cooked enough food to feed 30 people, and invited everyone who'd shown them kindness over the past year and a half. Porter came with his wife. Mrs. Patterson brought pie. Marshal Carson rode out from Helena. Even Morrison, the nervous county clerk, showed up with wine and an apology for not standing up to Boone sooner. They ate and drank and told stories as the sun went down and the air turned cool. Someone brought a fiddle. Someone else started singing. And for a few hours, the Hard Montana Ranch felt like the center of something warm and good and worth protecting. Cade found Evelyn later standing apart from the crowd, watching with that expression she got when she was calculating something. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That this is success. Not the profits or the paid debts or the government recognition. This, people gathering because they choose to be here, because they respect what we built. That is what success looks like." "You built most of it. We built it, together." She turned to face him. "I could not have done this alone any more than you could have. That is what partnership means." "I know." "Do you? Because sometimes I think you still see yourself as the man who was failing when I arrived. But that is not who you are anymore. You are the man who adapted, who learned, who chose collaboration over stubbornness. That is who I see when I look at you." Cade felt something tight in his chest. "I was terrified of you when you got off that stagecoach." "I know. You were everything I didn't want. I know that too. But you were everything I needed. I just couldn't see it yet." Evelyn smiled. "Neither could I. I thought I was coming here to manage a household. Instead, I found a life worth living." She took his hand. "Thank you for giving me that, for not sending me away, for letting me stay even when it made everything more complicated. You're the least complicated thing that's happened to me in years." "I am extraordinarily complicated. You have simply learned to appreciate complexity." They stood together watching their guests, this collection of people who'd become community, and Cade felt something he hadn't felt since before the war: peace. The party wound down as the temperature dropped. People left with thanks and promises to return. The hired hands cleaned up while Cade and Evelyn retreated inside where the fire was warm and the house was quiet. "That was nice," Cade said. "Yes, we should do it again, annually perhaps. Build tradition. Planning ahead? Always, someone has to." They sat by the fire, Evelyn reading while Cade worked on the accounts, a reversal from their early days when she'd been the one managing the numbers. He'd learned slowly how to track expenses and project income and make decisions based on data instead of hope. "The cattle are doing well," he said, reviewing the latest counts. "We could sell 20 head in spring and still maintain the breeding program. That would clear the remaining bank debt entirely." "Yeah." Evelyn set down her book. "We should do it." "Clear the debt? Free ourselves of that weight. Start fresh. What if we need the reserve capital? Then we will adapt. We always have." Cade looked at the numbers, thinking about what it would mean to finally, completely own the ranch outright. No debts, no creditors, just land and cattle and the work that came with it. "All right," he said. "We sell in spring." But they did exactly that. The cattle brought good prices at the Helena market, and by June, Cade walked into the bank and paid off the final note. The clerk stamped the documents, handed him the deed free and clear, and congratulated him on his persistence. Cade walked out into the summer sunshine, holding paper that said the ranch was his, really his, without qualifications or conditions. He'd carried that debt like chains for 7 years, and now it was gone. He found Evelyn at the general store negotiating over preserves. "It's done," he said. She understood immediately. "All of it?" "Every penny." Her face lit up, not the polite smile she used for strangers, but genuine joy. "Then we are free." "Yeah, we are." They celebrated quietly that night, just the two of them, with a meal Evelyn cooked special and wine they'd been saving for something important. They toasted to freedom, to survival, to the impossible journey from strangers to partners, to something deeper than either had expected. "What do we do now?" Cade asked. We keep building, we expand, we improve. Evelyn refilled his glass. We have the luxury of choice now. That is worth more than money. What would you choose? More fruit trees? Better irrigation? Perhaps a dairy operation? We have the space and the water. She paused. And I want to write to my solicitor in Boston. There are investments I made years ago that have matured. I would like to bring that capital here. Use it properly. You don't have to. This is my ranch too, Cade. My home. My future. If I wish to invest my own money in it, that is my choice. How much money are we talking about? Enough to make meaningful improvements. Perhaps enough to purchase additional land if any becomes available. Cade stared at her. You've been sitting on investment capital this whole time? I was waiting to see if we would survive. Now that we have, I see no reason not to commit fully. You're amazing. I am practical. There is a difference. The money arrived in August, more than Cade had imagined, enough to transform the ranch from functional to genuinely prosperous. They used it to build a proper dairy barn, purchase quality breeding stock, upgrade equipment, and hire 2 more hands. By fall, the ranch was producing milk, cream, butter, and cheese alongside the eggs, vegetables, and preserved goods. Evelyn had created multiple revenue streams, diversified enough that one bad season wouldn't destroy them. You've turned us into a proper business, Cade said, watching her manage the accounts with practiced efficiency. I have turned us into something sustainable. That was always the goal. When did you learn all this? When did I learn to run a complex operation with multiple revenue streams, limited capital, and difficult conditions? She looked at him over the ledger. I spent 30 years managing a household in England. It required the same skills. I simply lacked the authority to implement them as I wished. Here, I have authority. That makes all the difference. That winter was easier than any Cade could remember. The supplies were abundant. The animals were sheltered properly. The house was warm and weatherproof. And most importantly, he wasn't alone. He and Evelyn spent the long evenings planning for spring, discussing improvements, dreaming about possibilities that felt attainable now instead of impossible. I want to build a greenhouse, Evelyn said one night in January. For what? For extending the growing season. Fresh vegetables year-round. We could sell them at premium prices in winter when no one else has them. That's ambitious. Yes, but we have the resources now. Why not be ambitious? They built the greenhouse in March, a proper structure with good glass and solid framing. Evelyn planted carefully selected varieties, managed temperature and moisture with scientific precision, and within weeks had lettuce, tomatoes, and herbs growing in the middle of a Montana winter. The produce sold for double the summer prices. Restaurants in Helena and Butte competed to buy her supply. And once again, Evelyn had taken an idea and turned it into profit. You're a genius, Cade said, watching her transplant seedlings with expert care. I am observant. I see opportunities and I pursue them. That is not genius. That is work. You make it look easy. Nothing about this is easy. It is simply necessary. She straightened, looked at him. Do you understand yet? Why I came? Why I stayed? Why I work this hard? Tell me. Because for the first time in my life, I matter. Not because of my name or my breeding or who I married, because of what I do, what I build, what I create. Her eyes were fierce. I spent 30 years being decorative. I will spend however many years I have left being necessary, and I will not apologize for that. I'm not asking you to apologize. Good. Because I would refuse. Cade kissed her then, there in the greenhouse with dirt under her fingernails and determination in her eyes, and felt grateful for every difficult day that had led them here. By summer, the ranch was more than profitable. It was thriving. They'd hired 6 hands total, built proper facilities, established relationships with buyers throughout the territory. The operation ran smoothly, efficiently, successfully. In August, Porter stopped by with a proposal. I'm getting old, he said, and I got no family to pass the ranch to. Been thinking about selling. Wondered if you might be interested. Cade looked at Evelyn. She looked back with an expression that said your decision. Let me think about it, Cade said. After Porter left, they discussed it over dinner. It would double our holdings, Evelyn said. Give us control of the entire Northern Valley. The water rights alone are worth the investment. It's also a massive commitment, More land means more work, more hands, more everything. Yes, but we have proven we can manage complexity, and Porter is offering fair terms. He wants to see the land go to someone who will care for it properly. What do you want to do? I want to know what you want to do. This is a partnership, Cade. We decide together. He thought about it for 3 days. Thought about the ranch they'd saved, the business they'd built, the life they'd created from nothing. Thought about whether he wanted to expand or consolidate, grow or maintain. Finally, he made his decision. They bought Porter's ranch, merged the operations, hired more hands to manage the expanded territory. And within 6 months, they were running the largest sustainable ranching operation in the valley. People started calling it the Mercer Ashcroft Ranch, acknowledging both names, both contributions. Evelyn insisted on the dual naming, refused to let her work be erased into her husband's legacy. "We built this together," she said firmly. The name reflects that reality. By the time the second winter came, they were sitting on the porch of the original house, the one Cade had nearly lost, the one Evelyn had helped save, watching the sun set over land they owned free and clear. "You ever think about where we'd be if I'd sent you away?" Cade asked. "I think about it constantly. And I am grateful you were wise enough not to." She leaned against him, comfortable and settled. "Though I suspect I would have found some way to stay regardless. I can be quite stubborn when I choose." "I've noticed." "Good. Then you understand that I am not going anywhere. Ever. You are stuck with me. Could be worse." "Could it? I am demanding, opinionated, relentlessly practical, and I refuse to defer to your judgment when I believe I am correct, which is most of the time. Yeah, could definitely be worse." She smiled, and they sat together as the light faded and the stars came out. Two people who'd found each other in the worst circumstances and built something that lasted. The ranch would continue, the work would continue, the seasons would turn, and the challenges would come, and they would face them the way they'd faced everything else. Together, stubborn, refusing to quit, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Years later, when people in the valley told stories about the stubborn rancher who'd stood up to Boone Harrow, they always included the part about his wife, the English lady who'd shown up expecting to be dismissed and instead became the force that saved the ranch, who'd turned disaster into success through sheer determination and ruthless efficiency. Some of the stories were exaggerated, some were simplified, but the core truth remained: they'd survived when they shouldn't have. They'd thrived when everyone expected them to fail, and they'd done it by refusing to give up on each other or the land they'd claimed as home. On clear nights, you could see the lights of the Mercer Ashcroft Ranch from miles away, a warm glow in the Montana darkness, proof that even the most unlikely partnerships could become something lasting. Cade and Evelyn would sit on the porch those nights, watching the valley they'd helped shape, and feel content with what they'd built. Not perfect. Nothing about their life was perfect, but real, earned, and theirs. "Do you regret it?" Cade asked on one of those nights, the question he'd asked a dozen times over the years. Evelyn's answer was always the same. Every difficult moment, and none of it. Because the difficult moments were what made the good ones matter. The struggles were what gave the victories weight. And the fear and uncertainty and near failures were what made the eventual success feel earned. They'd started as strangers bound by desperation. They'd become partners through necessity, and they'd transformed into something deeper through choice. Choosing each other, choosing the work, choosing to believe that even broken people in impossible situations could build something worth keeping. The ranch would outlast them. The land would remain long after they were gone. But the story of how a hardened rancher and an aging noblewoman saved each other and the land they loved, that story would persist too. Not because it was romantic or dramatic or particularly unusual in the grand scheme of things, but because it was true. And truth, Evelyn always said, was worth more than fiction any day of the week.